Hi friends, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new here. Today's video is going to be a mega video of 30 wreath ideas covering all the seasons of the year. So we're going to start with spring and our number one video. So we're going to start by taking some Spanish moss that I got at the Dollar Tree and this grapevine wreath that I picked up at Hobby Lobby. And we're just going to stretch the Spanish moss about a fourth of the wreath. We are making this look like a nest, so we're just kind of stretching and pulling and filling it out around that fourth of the wreath. I'm just using my hot glue gun and securing it in place as I go around, and then I just go back in and add a little bit more to some places where I thought it looked a little sparse. Then I'm going to take this garland that I got in the Easter section at Hobby Lobby. I know that they do have like some plastic eggs at the Dollar Tree too that you could use in lieu of this garland. I just cut the garland apart, and then I'm going to go ahead and glue it onto the nest part, and I just do a varying pattern with the bigger eggs and the smaller eggs. So we're ready to make the bow for the wreath, and I'm going to try out this new technique that I saw. So we're going to make a tail of about 12 inches with the two pieces of ribbon that I planned on using. At the end of those 12 inches where the spools are, I'm going to lay my hand down and I'm going to start wrapping the ribbon around my hand. When I was researching this bow method, it suggested that you put 6 loops around your hand. I don't quite make it the 6 loops because my polka dotted ribbon runs out of the spool. So I think I make it about 5.5 turns around the ribbon. Once I have the ribbon all wound around my hand, I take my hand out of the loops, and then I'm going to take a piece of wire and I'm going to tie off the back of the ribbon. Once I have the ribbon tied off in the back, then I'm going to go ahead and cut it from the blue spool that's still left, and then I'm ready to fluff out the bow. When I start fluffing out my bow, I realize that I probably should have laid the polka dotted ribbon on the underside of the blue ribbon when I started wrapping it around my hand, because as you can see, the polka dotted ribbon is kind of underneath the blue ribbon, and my original thought was to have the polka dotted ribbon be on the top. So just, if you're using a patterned ribbon and you want that one to be the star or the focus, make sure that's on the underside of your solid colored ribbon. So once I get it all fluffed out, I'm just going to take that wire, run it through the grapevine wreath, and tie it off in the back. I do go take a piece of smaller polka dot ribbon and run it around the middle of the bow to give it more of the bow-like feel. And then once I fluff it out a little bit more on the wreath, then this project is done. For today's wreath, we're going to take a 16-inch wreath form from the Dollar Tree, and I'm taking this burlap ribbon that also came from the Dollar Tree. I like to take mine off of the spools and wrap them around paper. I store them in these plastic bins, which takes up a lot less space for me. So you can't always tell that they came from the Dollar Tree, but this one did come from the Dollar Tree. So I'm going to start by wrapping it just a small amount around part of the wreath, and then I'm going to glue that in place, and then I'm going to wrap this ribbon all around the entire wreath form. I think it takes me about 3 of the spools of ribbon to cover this entire wreath. As I'm gluing the ribbon around the wreath, I don't put glue every time I wrap it around. I probably only put glue in about 2 or 3 places for the entire spool of ribbon, definitely at the end. And then it takes me, like I said, about 3 spools of the ribbon to cover the whole wreath. So this is the very end of the ribbon spool, and I decided to go ahead and just use this as part of the hanger. So I put it to my desired length to hang it, and then I use my hot glue just to glue it in place. I glue it down here, then I wrap around that bottom piece up towards the top, and then I cut it off right at the base of the wreath, and then I glue that part to the wreath form as well. I'm just going to snip off any extra that's left there and then hot glue that to the wreath form, and then we're ready to assemble our wreath. So this wreath is full of layers, and so the first layer that we're going to work on is these gloves. I picked these up at the Dollar Tree, and all I'm going to do is take the wrist part of the gloves and I'm going to fold it over the wreath form, and then I'm going to hot glue those wrist parts down to the wreath. So I start with that bottom one, I hot glue that one to the wreath form, and then the top glove I glue to the other glove. And then you're going to see here in a second I forget to glue it to the front of the wreath, but you're going to want to glue the hand part to the front of the wreath form as well. So originally I tried to zip tie each of these separately, and then that did not work out, and so I clipped those off, and then I just decided to take one zip tie and zip tie the shovel and the little rake together, and then I took another zip tie and I zip tied that grouping together onto the wreath form. As you can see, I'm gluing the front of the gloves down to the wreath, and now we're ready to assemble the rest of the wreath. So I took my seed packets that I picked up at Dollar General. You can definitely get some at Dollar Tree. Mine were just happened to be sold out. I did not take the seeds out of these packets. You could definitely do that though. Put them in baggies, label them so you know what you're planting later. If you're someone like me who tears open the packets and then keeps the packet with it in the baggie for later, you could definitely use those packets as well. If I was going to use recycled packets, I would cut off the top and glue them together just to give it a more finished look. So as I am lying these around, I'm just kind of deciding I don't want 2 of the same ones next to each other, and I want kind of the title showing, so I'm just sporadically picking out of the ones I bought. And then I do add a couple more on top of each other just to give it a little bit more dimension. Then I go ahead and take my hot glue and I glue those all down to the wreath form. So I'm using my Easy Bow Maker to make a bow today. I'm using this red burlap ribbon that I got at the Dollar Tree along with this polka dot ribbon that also came from the Dollar Tree. I took some of the white grosgrain ribbon and wrapped it around the middle because I did zip tie this together and I didn't want the zip tie to show. Once I have that all together, I go ahead and dovetail the ends, and then I secure the bow onto the wreath with another zip tie. I did go ahead and tie a shoelace bow that I ended up putting in the middle of this bow because I felt like it was missing something. You guys let me know, what would you have put in the middle of this bow? I tried to put some seed packets there, but I felt like they were too big, and so I just was struggling with what might have looked cute in the middle of that bow. So let me know down in the comments below what you would have put there. Once I have this bow secured and it's fluffed out, then this project is complete.
It's like 90 degrees, it's making me hot, and he has the same effect on me. It's just something about the way that he's making me feel. My insides are out, I just wanna shout his name. My body's giving up on me, cause I don't know what to do with my fingertips. I wanna run through his hair, but I'm trying not to stare. I get a little starstruck when I see him. I couldn't hate him even if I tried. Am I a little crazy to believe that I could wake up with him by my side? I know I could get his attention if I worked it all out. And we got a little tipsy on a Saturday night. Yeah, I want him and I need him. He's got a one-way ticket to my heart.
Thank you for joining me for today's project. I had so much fun making this and it looks super cute on my front door. I'm living the spring and summer vibes. I am ready for warmer weather, which it is definitely warming up here. So let me know if you are going to hang a wreath on your front door this year and if you are going for any kind of specific summer vibes. If you haven't subscribed to my channel and you loved today's video, I would love it if you went down, hit the subscribe button, and became a part of my YouTube family. As always, wherever you are in your journey is a perfect place to start, and I will see you guys in the next video. So we're going to be making a bushel basket wreath, and my inspiration came from Your Cozy Home on Pinterest. So my local Hobby Lobby was selling their bushel baskets for $2 each. These are the ones that they had been previously using like to display things. So they weren't in the best of shape, but I went ahead and picked one up and I used some white spray paint and spray painted the inside. So the only DIY really for this project is I made a simple bow, and I'm just going to add that bow to this little bunny that I got at the Dollar Tree. So I picked up some decorative shred at the Dollar Tree, and I am going to use the purple one, but I thought the brown one would also be like a nice neutral color if you were decorating for like a neutral Easter or spring. So I did pick up one bag of the shred because I'm trying to keep this at $10. I had an extra bag on hand. You could do this project with one bag, it just makes it rather sparse with your grass, but if you want to, I went ahead and used about a bag and a half because I'd already used maybe a half of that bag. And I'm just going to go ahead and lay it into the bottom of one of the sides of the basket. Now, I didn't glue it on there yet because I wanted to just double check where I wanted it before I laid everything down. So you're just going to kind of tear it apart and make sure that it goes over the desired amount that you want on the bottom of your bushel basket. So I just kind of spaced it out, and then I took my bunny that came from the Dollar Tree and I'm going to place him into the back of the wreath. I also picked up these eggs. These are the giant eggs that they have, and so they are $1.25 each. If you wanted to use some smaller eggs so that you could have some more filler in there, you definitely could do that. Now the Dollar Tree is $1.25. There are some things that I'm like, I don't know if I think that's worth $1.25. For instance, these giant eggs, because when I try to keep these projects under $10 for you guys, sometimes it's hard to find some stuff over there to make like a large project. So I don't know, let me know down in the comments what you guys think. Are there some products that you are no longer buying over at Dollar Tree because you don't want to pay the $1.25? So I went ahead and put some hot glue on the bunny's bottom, and I just went ahead and glued it to the basket. And now that I know where I want my shred to be, I go back and I put some hot glue down on the bottom of the basket, and I adhere my shred. I do this in several different sections, because if you want to place this outside, you want to make sure that the majority of your shred is glued to each other. If you're going to place this inside, then it doesn't matter as much if you get all of the shred glued down or not. So then I'm going to take my 3 eggs and I'm just going to place them into the back of the basket. When I was making this project, it really reminded me of these sugar eggs that my mom used to make when she was younger. And you would look into the hole and see the design inside the sugar egg. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about, but this reminded me of it because you have to, there's such a long space between the front of the basket and the back. And for some reason, it just gave me those sugar egg vibes. Nobody makes those anymore. Let me know if you've ever made one down in the comments. So once I get the bunny and the eggs glued in, then I make a bow, and I've been making this bow quite a bit lately. It's like one of my favorite ways. If you want a full tutorial on how to make this, I will go ahead and link that down in my description box. But I have 3 separate sections, and I'm just going to take a zip tie and zip tie all 3 of the sections together. That way I have one giant bow. And then I'm just going to take some pliers or wire cutters and cut that zip tie off. So then I'm just going to fluff out the bow. So the bow is actually optional. If I add up all of the costs for my basket and the things inside, it's about $9.50. If you want to add the bow, then you can go ahead and do that. If you want to keep it at just $10, then you wouldn't want to add the bow. I had this ribbon on hand, so I think that the basket actually really needs a bow, but you know, it's up to you. This basket actually had a hole already in place there, probably because Hobby Lobby had tied these down to the top of their shelves, but you're just going to want to place a little hole if yours doesn't have a hole. And then I used my zip tie and I just zip tied it right to the basket, and then I fluffed out the bow. So the last thing that we're going to need to do here is, it kind of depends on how you're going to display this. I do show you here in a little bit a couple different ways to display this basket. So if you're going to want to hang it on a door or at the side of your house or something like that, you're going to want to poke a hole into the back of the basket. I just used some scissors and poked a pretty rough hole into the back. I had a nail that sticks out on the side of my house and it worked perfect, and you can't see it on the inside of the basket either. So here is the basket hanging on the side of my house. I think it's adorable. It's very simple and plain, but there is a lot that you could do to this. Since I had kept it at the $10, I didn't feel like there was a lot I could add in there. But if I was just going to decorate this as a wreath, I definitely think florals and all kinds of things could go in here and make a really beautiful, unique wreath. So here is the basket just sitting out on my table out in my front yard. I do feel like it kind of moves more just being like stationary here, and I live in a windy area, so I think this is not an option for me. But if you have like a covered patio or something like that, you could put that there. It also can hang on a door, which I can show you here, and it just kind of sticks out farther onto the door. Today we're going to be creating a spring cross wreath, and we're going to be using deco mesh and a petal method. So this is 10-inch deco mesh from Hobby Lobby, and it is the plastic deco mesh that you can pick up there. It's a little bit more on the pricey side, however, I think it's definitely worth it. I like working with this mesh a lot. So we're going to be cutting our squares into 10-inch squares, and as you can see, mine are still a tiny bit crooked. You want to make sure that you can get those squares as close to 10 by 10 as you possibly can. What I've learned a little bit from doing this technique is you need to make sure that your deco mesh lines up on both edges of your mat. So you want to make sure it's 10 inches, you know, in lengthwise on the left hand side in my photo here, and then you want to cut at the 10 inches because we're trying to get them to be a 10-inch square. So we're going to be folding these and then cinching them in the middle and twirling them up. And I wanted to show you guys, I am doing a low fray method here, but I wanted to show you what happens if you do it the opposite way. So in this case, we put the finished edges together and cinched them up, and when you do that and pull them into the side to make your petal, it has the part that you cut, or the unfinished edge, showing, and that's going to cause you to have a lot of fraying in your wreath. So what we want to do is we want to take the unfinished edges and put them together, and then we're going to cinch that up in the middle, and then when we twirl it up here to the side, we get the finished edges as the part that goes onto our wreath. This will help you with a lot less fraying on your wreath. I made 2 petals that were fraying, and then the rest of them that were not fraying, and I forgot to go back and fix them. So when I put them in my wreath, it was kind of noticeable because of how much fraying there was. So definitely this is a much better way to make sure that you have less fraying in your wreath. So again, you're going to put your unfinished edges together, cinch it up in the middle, twist it so that they are next to each other, and then I'm using my rubber bands again, and I'm just going to secure them down at the bottom, and that gives me the petal. This is super simple and a little bit forgiving, especially if your squares are not exactly the 10 by 10. If they're a little bit off, you'll never notice in this petal method. So once you have all your petals made, now we're ready to secure them to the wreath. So all my petals together, it took me 1 package and 4 more pieces. So you're going to have to pick up 2 packages of deco mesh unless you space them out a little bit farther, because like I said, it was just 4 pieces in the second package of the deco mesh. So I'm going to put my petal here onto the wire frame, and I'm using a zip tie. These came from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to zip tie it to the metal piece. So what I did was thread my pipe cleaner. I threaded my zip tie in underneath the middle section of the frame, and then I pulled that up and put it on top of the deco mesh, and then I secured it. And as you can see, I have a helper today. He's very curious about the deco mesh, so he likes to sit by me while I craft. But you're going to put it in between that metal piece that is in the very middle, and then cinch it up, and you're going to clip it off, and then you have these really nice petals that have very little fraying because our finished edges are the ones that are poking out. And so you're just going to continue to do this on the top part of our cross. So I go ahead and add about 6 petals here to the top, and then I'm going to do the exact same thing on both sides of our cross. So each of those smaller cross sections is going to have 6 petals attached to it. So now that we've filled in the top of our cross and each one of those sections had 6 pieces, now we're ready to do the rest of our cross. And we're going to do the same method. We're going to lay our petal onto our wreath, and then we're going to take our zip tie and go through the middle section of the wreath form. And then once we have that into the wreath form, then we're going to secure our zip tie prior to putting our petal in, but not all the way down. Then we're just going to move our petal into that zip tie and then secure it and cut it off. Once we have all of our deco mesh on, I think it looks absolutely beautiful. I did leave the middle section open for a bow. So what we're going to do for this bow, if you've been watching me for a little while, you know I love to make these bows, but if you're new here, we're going to make several sections of this bow before we put it all together. So I measured this section out to be about 12 inches, and I'm going to have 4 loops and 2 tails from this ribbon for this 12-inch section. We are going to be making 4 sections here, and it actually ends up being 5 sections because I go back and add a section later. But we're going to do a section at 12 inches, 11 inches, 10 inches, 9 inches, and then I go back and make another 12-inch section with the sheer pink ribbon. So I just alternated them. The 12-inch ribbon was the flowers, the 11-inch ribbon was the sheer pink ribbon, 10 inches was the flowers again, 9 inches was the sheer pink ribbon, and then I went back and made a 12-inch sheer pink ribbon to add to the back of this bow, just so it seemed to even itself out a little bit. Once I have all the sections put together, I take another zip tie and I zip tie all the sections together. It does make for a little bit of a bulky bow down at the bottom of all the sections. However, once you get it attached to your project, you will never see the bulkiness that is there. So just make sure that you're using good zip ties and that you have it secured all together there. So once I have all the pieces secured with my zip tie, I just go ahead and fluff it out and then I dovetail the ends. Now I'm ready to place it into my wreath, and I'm just going to use another zip tie to place it onto my wreath form. And because I left that middle section open, I'm just going to put my zip tie through the middle section and secure it in the back. And then once I have it secured in the back, I'm going to go ahead and fluff out the ribbon to make a beautiful bow. And then that is it for this project. For this next project, we're going to be making an XO wreath, and we're going to be using a pool noodle for our wreath form. Let me know down in the comments below, have you ever used a pool noodle to make a wreath? I made a super fun vintage wreath this Christmas using a pool noodle and I absolutely loved it. So I decided I would try and make a Valentine wreath with the pool noodle as well, and it didn't disappoint. So if you haven't tried the pool noodle hack for a wreath form, I definitely suggest you try it, and don't forget, let me know down below if you have ever done that before. So once I have the pool noodle glued together, then I took the microfiber mop from the Dollar Tree and I'm going to be gluing this at a diagonal angle. So I just place one end of the microfiber mop with some glue on it, I attach it to the pool noodle, and then I wrap it around diagonally sorry, and I'm going to glue the other end down to the pool noodle. So this is going to take about 8 of these microfiber mops to glue around the entire wreath form. So once you get this end glued on there, we're going to take the next microfiber mop and we're just going to line it up next to where that piece was glued on, and you're just going to piece it together as you go around. Once you have it all on there, you're not going to be able to notice at all that the wreath was pieced together. You can fluff it out a little bit and you'll never know. So I am using a white pool noodle. If your Dollar Tree is not selling white pool noodles at this time, no worries, you can use a different color. You just need to make sure that your mop is glued really close together so none of the pool noodle shows through, but they are heavy duty enough that it shouldn't be able to see the color through the mop. Once I get all of the microfiber mops glued on there, then you're going to have this super fun fluffy wreath form. Now I thought this would be adorable for a winter wonderland wreath as well, because it would look really cute with some bottle brush trees, and at my Hobby Lobby right now the bottle brush trees are all 90% off. So I think I need to run over to Hobby Lobby, grab some of those bottle brush trees, and be ready for next year's winter wonderland wreath. So I picked up these XO letters from Hobby Lobby over in the unfinished wood area. You do get a set of 2 of them, or like 4 letters altogether. I am only using 2 of the letters. I went ahead and used my folk art chalk paint and covered it with the pink color, and I'll leave that color down in the description box. And then I'm just taking some white acrylic paint and I'm dry brushing over both of the letters. Once I have that completed, I'm just going to use some hot glue and I'm going to glue these letters to the wreath form. You don't need any like super hold here. These aren't really heavy and they attach really nicely to the microfiber mop. Once I get that glued on, I just add a little bit of a hanger to the back with some white ribbon, and then our wreath is going to be complete. This is super easy and super fun, and it makes such a fun statement, and I've seen several of these kind of wreaths on Pinterest lately. So today we're going to be making an Easter egg wreath, and here are the supplies for today's project. We're going to need 42 large plastic eggs, 24 small plastic eggs, a wreath form or a pool noodle. I'm using a pool noodle, some Excelsior, and some ribbon. So the reason I didn't put the price for the plastic eggs is because last year or the year before I picked up these plastic eggs for really cheap at Hobby Lobby. My large eggs were like 25 cents and the small egg package was 15 cents. I am using another package from the Dollar Tree as well. I highly suggest you go check out Walmart before buying your plastic eggs because I think you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck. So I went ahead and taped my pool noodle together. This is not a full pool noodle. This was just left over from last week's project and I decided to use it up. And so I'm just going to take my plastic eggs and I'm going to glue them all around the pool noodle. So if you're using a wreath form, I suggest the green foam wreath form at Dollar Tree. It's a little bit smaller than this pool noodle, so you might use a little less eggs, but you'll still get the same cute effect. So once I am gluing the eggs, I just put a strip of glue down the back and then I go ahead and press it into my pool noodle. So you can see here that you have to like hold on to it for a little bit before you let go. I don't know if it's because it's the foam, but it takes a little bit of time to adhere to the foam. So I just put some glue on, held it there for like maybe 10 seconds, and then I moved on to the next egg. So I'm just going to take different colored plastic eggs to go all around the top part of my pool noodle. Once I have the plastic eggs attached to the top of my pool noodle, then I'm going to take some more of the large plastic eggs and I'm going to glue them on the inner ring of the pool noodle. Again, if you're using the green floral foam wreath, you're going to do the same thing. You're, again, probably going to use less eggs because this is a little bit larger. If you're using a pool noodle, you might need more eggs because it's going to be a little bit larger because I didn't use a full pool noodle. So I am gluing these kind of to an angle for the inside of the pool noodle, and I just do the exact same thing that I did before and I glue them all around the inside. So now I'm ready to glue the little eggs onto the top, and so I'm going to take the pointed egg part and stick it down between the other two eggs, and I'm just going to do that all around the top of the wreath frame or wreath form. I find that putting a large amount of glue on the pointy part of the egg worked really well. So now I'm ready to kind of do the fun part. You're going to want to take a full bag of Excelsior. I pick mine up at Hobby Lobby, and you can get these on sale every once in a while. And I'm just taking a little piece of it and going into all the little open areas of the wreath. We don't want any of the green part of our pool noodle to show through, and we're going to take the Excelsior and just take a little bunch and poke it into all the holes. This is super fun because it gives it a more nest feel, and then you get a really fun like Easter baskety vibe going on here. So once I do the inside, now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing with the outside, and you can put as much or as little as you want on the top part of the eggs. You can even go around the other side of the eggs. I did not do that. I just kind of filled in all the holes that you could see, but it's really up to you. This did take a full bag of the Excelsior, so if you're going to get a bag of it. Make sure you get the bigger bag. Also, you could use some Spanish moss here, and that would look really cute as well. You could use the brown or the green, and you're going to get the same effect. I just liked the look of the lighter color, but it's really up to you. So you can see I have some bigger holes and some smaller holes. It really doesn't matter because you're going to fill that all in with the Excelsior, and by the time you get it all in, you're not going to be able to notice. It is a pretty messy project, so definitely have a trash can handy. And as you can see, I had a helper today. He was really interested in the Excelsior. So once I get all the Excelsior into all the places, and this is a tad bit time consuming, so I listened to podcasts while I was crafting today. You know, it's totally up to you, but it is a little bit time consuming. So once I have that all done, I'm going to make a bow. And if you missed my last week's bicycle wreath video, I tried out a new bow tutorial, and I am telling you guys, this has to be my favorite bow like ever. I don't think I'm ever going to make another bow as long as I live, or until a new technique comes along. But I'm going to go ahead and make another one of those bows. If you want the full tutorial of how to make this bow, you can pick up that video down in the description box, and I'll post it up here in the cards. But you're just going to make 4 loops here. I measured these out at 12 inches, and then I go ahead and do 3 more bundles, 1 at 10 and 1 at 11, 1 at 10. I am cutting with my right hand here, and I am a lefty, so it took me a minute because I didn't think that through as I was holding on to the bow loops. But I go ahead and to attach these, I use a zip tie, and I just zip tie the bundles together, and then you're going to see here in a second I zip tie all of those bundles together to make a super fun and full bow. So I did use this bow technique on another project that you guys can see later on in this week, but I made it smaller because it is a smaller project, and the bow technique worked just as well for a smaller bow. I did less loops, a less grouping of loops, and it turned out absolutely adorable. So I highly recommend trying out this bow technique, especially if you're somebody that kind of struggles with making bows. I've tried a lot of different techniques, and this is the one that stuck for me, but it's a personal preference. If you have a bow technique that works for you, you can always stay with that, but this one, I'm just absolutely in love with it. So here's our bundles, and we're going to go ahead and just zip tie all of our bundles together. You'll see that when you zip tie them, you'll have like a flatter side on the like bundle part. I just put all the flat sides together so it was going to lay a little bit flatter, and then I went ahead and zip tied those together, and this just cut off the zip tie part. So to attach it to my wreath, I also used a zip tie, and I just went around the eggs with my zip tie and attached it to the wreath. I am going to go ahead and dovetail all the ends of our ribbon just to give it a more high-end look. So here I am attaching it to the wreath, and I'm just using a zip tie to attach it to it. Once I get it in the desired place I want it to be, then I'm going to just fluff out the bow. So I start with the loops, and then once I have the loops kind of fluffed out, I'm going to take the tails and lay them so that they lay kind of in the middle of the wreath. This is super easy. This bow makes this just so adorable, and I hope that you guys really love this project. I love creating these budget-friendly DIYs for you. I hope that you guys are enjoying it too. Let me know down in the comments something that you would like to see me recreate that is maybe $10 or less. Start with a bird's nest wreath. So believe it or not, I have never made a clothespin wreath before, and so I decided to try one out. I picked up 2 packages of clothespins at Dollar Tree, and then some of my favorite spray paint. I am outside spraying these. They are in a box. I just give them one really good coat, and then I shake up the box and continue that process for about 4 coats. It does take quite a while for these to dry, especially since I live in a colder climate, and they weren't totally all the way dry when I went to start to assemble this wreath. But that is okay. Not all of them have the same coverage of spray paint either, but we're going to dry brush them in a few minutes, and so it really doesn't matter if some of the clothespins are more saturated with the spray paint than others. So we're going to attach these to the wreath form. This is a 12-inch wreath form from Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to attach them to the bottom two metal pieces of the wreath. So it takes about 12 clothespins to go from each section, or in each section, and so it does take the full 2 packages of clothespins to complete this wreath. So once I get all of the clothespins onto the wreath, then I'm going to take some white acrylic paint. This is just paint that I had on hand, and a chippy brush, and I'm going to dry brush around the entire wreath. So this is so much easier having them attached to the wreath than trying to dry brush them individually. It goes really fast. Once I get that all dry brushed, then I'm going to set it aside to let it dry a little bit, and I'm going to work on the bird's nest. So for the bird's nest, I took a styrofoam ball that I picked up at Walmart. This styrofoam ball was the medium-sized styrofoam ball. They have like a large one, and then they have like a smaller one. I went for the medium size. I didn't quite cut it in half. It's about 1/3 of the styrofoam ball, and I did shave off the bottom, and then I'm going to take out the inside of the styrofoam ball. So once I have that all out, I'm going to take some Spanish moss. This is one that I had on hand. They do sell it at the Dollar Tree. They also sell it at Hobby Lobby, and it does go on sale pretty regularly. You can also pick it up on Amazon, and I will link a link down in my description box for the Amazon product. So then you're just going to take your desired amount, put some hot glue on your styrofoam, and then glue your Spanish moss into it. Spanish moss is messy, so you definitely want to have some kind of container or something down on your surface so that you can have easy cleanup. But you're just going to do the inside, then I flipped it over to the outside, and then I flipped it on its side and just filled in any kind of white pieces from the styrofoam that were there, because you don't want any of the white to be showing. Once I have that all covered, then I went ahead and put it onto the wreath. I am taking some eggs that I had left over in my stash. I believe these came from Hobby Lobby. The Dollar Tree also sells some similar eggs. They also have some sparkly eggs if you'd rather have sparkly eggs. I just went ahead and glued them into the wreath, and then I made a bow. If you've been following me for my last few videos, I tried out a new bow technique, and I will have the video down in my description box of the full tutorial of how I made the bow. But I made this bow without wired ribbon, and the technique worked just as well, so I was super excited for that. I just absolutely love this bow, and it's super easy. So I just make it into 3 sections, attach it together with a zip tie, and then I dovetailed the ends, and I'm just going to hot glue it to the clothespins right above the nest, and then this wreath is complete. I think this turned out absolutely adorable. I love it's simple, and it just has like a really fun farmhouse look. So let me know down in the comments if you liked this one or not. So we're going to start out using this buffalo check ribbon, and I'm going to measure about 12 inches. I should have marked it on my mat because later in the video you're going to see I mark it with one of my clips, but I went ahead and measured out 12 inches, and I'm going to create 3 loops that are 12 inches in length, which end up being about 11 inches when you put them together as a bow. So this is a new bow technique that I'm trying out today, and I actually really loved it. I'm definitely going to go ahead and try to continue to use this. I started out using a pipe cleaner to hold them together, but then I felt like that was a little not sturdy enough, and so later I show you that I went ahead and used a zip tie. So definitely when you start to make this bow, just go ahead, skip the pipe cleaner, and go with the zip tie. So I make 4 loops for this first part of the bow, measuring out again, like I said, at 12 inches, and then I go ahead and make a tail on both sides that is also 12 inches. Then I'm going to use my clip to hold it together and clip off the end of the tail, and then I'm ready to make the next section of my bow. So for the next section of my bow, I'm going to do this very same thing, only now I'm going to measure it out at 11 inches. That's going to give us 10-inch loop sections, and we're going to get about 3 or 4 of these in this section, and then once we're done with that, we will cut off another 11-inch section where we will make that the tail. Once I had each section completed, I took a zip tie and zip tied it together to hold the section in place. When I was kind of experimenting with this bow technique, I started out with a pipe cleaner, but I felt like the pipe cleaner did not give it a secure hold, and as I was kind of playing around with it, a couple of my loops popped out, which is what kind of led me towards the zip ties instead, because you get such a better permanent hold with the zip tie. Then you're going to do another section here. These are going to be 10-inch strips, which are going to give us 9-inch loops. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I made 4 bundles on this one instead of 3. And then I'm going to secure them in place with a pipe, or not a pipe cleaner, a zip tie, sorry. Then I'm going to measure this one out at a 9-inch strip, and then it's going to give us an 8-inch loop, and I'm going to get 3 loops out of this one and then another tail and tie it off with another zip tie. So altogether I've used 4 zip ties here to create the bundles. Now we're ready to put the bow all together, so I took all 4 of the bundles and I laid them on top of each other, and I took another zip tie and I zip tied all 4 of the bundles together. So you can do this any way that you would like. You can use a pipe cleaner here. I just felt like the zip tie gave it more of a secure hold. I think this bow is absolutely beautiful. We are making a bicycle wreath today, so our bow is sitting to the side. However, this bow would work just fine for a deco mesh wreath or a grapevine wreath because it's so full, and you can add as many loops or as little of the loops as you want. You could have even kept going with the strips and made more of them into this bow. So I mean, the sky is the limit really for how full you want this bow to be, but I thought this was the perfect amount. 4 sets, 1 at 12, 1 at 11, 1 at 10, and 1 at 9. So now that we have the bow all secured together, I took a section of pool noodle that I had on hand. This was 6 inches long, and I cut it down the side and I'm attaching it to the bicycle wreath. This is just to help me with the florals that I'm going to put into the wreath so that they have something to hold on to. I'm going to glue the pool noodle back together so that it is secure onto the bicycle wreath. Once I have that glued onto the wreath, then I'm going to take my bow and I'm going to secure that into the middle of my pool noodle. That's just to give me kind of the center of what I'm working with here. So I took another zip tie and I zip tied the bow into the middle of our pool noodle. Super simple, and it doesn't take a lot of steps. I get a lot of questions or comments on my videos saying, I've never tried a wreath. Oh, I wish I knew how to do a wreath. And if you were ever going to start somewhere with a wreath, this is the perfect place to start. There are no extra steps here. There's not a lot of things to do in this wreath, and so this is the perfect place to start for your wreath. So we're going to lay our bow onto the middle of the pool noodle, and I'm going to take my zip tie and just lay it underneath the pool noodle and then through the bicycle wreath, and I'm going to attach it onto the pool noodle part. That makes it really secure onto the wreath and the pool noodle, so when we start to add our florals, then we have a section underneath the bow and a section above the bow that we can add some florals to. Then again, we're going to dovetail the ends of our ribbons to give it a more high-end look and to make our projects look more store-bought rather than homemade. So I picked up 2 bundles of the lavender from Walmart. That is one of my most favorite things to decorate in the spring and summer. So I'm just going to attach 1 bundle down in the bottom of the wreath and a bundle up in the top of the wreath. I did go ahead and cut them apart to attach them better into the pool noodle part. That way I have more control, but if you want, you could even just attach the entire piece of your florals in there, depending on how long the bottom is. I felt like the lavender was too long to just kind of stick it in there, so that is another reason why I cut it apart. But I like cutting it apart because then I have more control over where to stick them and to fluff them out. But if you're afraid of doing that, afraid of cutting them too short, you can always start with just putting the whole bundle in there and fanning them out. So we're ready to use the flowers I picked up at the Dollar Tree. There's only one bundle here and there are 5 flowers on this bundle. I like to do odd numbers in my project, so that works for me. If you feel like that's not enough, you can always pick up another bundle. But again, we were going for about $10 for this project, and so that only allowed me to pick up one of the bundles. But I put 3 of the flowers down on the bottom, 2 flowers on the top, and I just stuck these right into the pool noodle. So there is no gluing here. If you feel like the flowers aren't in there attached really well, you could always put some glue like on the outside of where your flower stem meets the pool noodle, just to give it a little bit more stability. But there's not a lot of gluing entailed in this project, if at all. I just put a little bit on some of the lavender that didn't seem to be sticking into the pool noodle very well, but hardly any did I have to put in there. So once you're done, you're going to fluff out your bow a couple more times, and then that is it for this super simple but elegant bicycle wreath. I think this is adorable. I think this is the perfect place to start for wreaths if this is your first one, and if not, it definitely adds such a fun, romantic touch to spring and Valentine's Day as we transition into, yay, some warmer weather. For this project, we're going to start out with a 12-inch wreath form from the Dollar Tree, and I'm using some wire cutters, and I'm just going to cut this wreath form in half. Next, we're going to take some mesh that came from the Dollar Tree. You can find these colors in their regular crafting area, so they should be available all year. I'm just using a regular ruler. I measure my mesh out to be about 5 inches, and then I cut it and I just put it into a grouping like you can see above the ruler. I'm going to do this for the entire bundle. Some people use rotary cutters to get a straight line. I don't really worry about it. I use a rolling technique to do my wreaths, and so it really doesn't matter if they're even or not on the ends. Next, I'm going to take some pipe cleaners. These were just some that I had left over. If you want to have all matching colors, you can. You can't actually see it when you're done with the wreath, so to me it doesn't ever really matter, but I'm just going to bend it in half and cut it in half. I only use half of the pipe cleaner per bundle. Some people use a full pipe cleaner. It kind of depends on, your mobility and if you have, problems with your hands when you get to the back to tie it off. So to start the wreath, I'm just going to take 3 of the pieces of the green mesh and I'm going to roll them up into a bundle, and then I'm going to secure them with the pipe cleaner. As you can see off to the left, I have some ribbon. I decided not to use the green ribbon in the wreath itself. I do use it towards the end along with that polka dot ribbon, but we are going to use the white ribbon and the buffalo check ribbon. So after every 3rd bundle on our wreath form, I'm going to put a group of ribbon, and I'm just putting it together just like the bundles. So I take a pipe cleaner and I tie it off in the middle, and then after every 3rd bundle, like I said, I put a grouping of the ribbon. I'm going to do that on the bottom 2 rings of the wreath form. So here it is all completed. It's about 9 bundles of green mesh per little section of the wreath, and then it would be 3 groups of the ribbon. Then I'm going to do that. I did the exact same thing with the pink mesh that I did with the green mesh, and I'm using this polka dotted black ribbon for the inside of the watermelon. I'm going to be doing the top 2 sections, I guess, of the wreath the exact same way. So I'm rolling 3 pieces of the mesh up and then grouping it together using a pipe cleaner and then attaching it to the wreath form. I ended up using 3 packages of the green and only 2 packages of the pink because it's a little bit less of a semicircle towards the top of the wreath. So I'm just doing the same thing, grouping them in groups of 3, attaching it to the wreath form. After every 3rd grouping, I put a bundle of the black and white polka dotted ribbon with a black ribbon on top to kind of replicate the seeds, and then I'm going to do that along the whole top section. So for the bow for this wreath, I'm deciding to do a crisscross bow. I've never done that for a wreath before, so I thought I would check this out since this is kind of an unconventional shape of a wreath anyway. So I'm just laying the ribbons on top of each other. I used a piece of twine and tied it off, and then I'm using some of my buffalo check ribbon to go around the middle. Then I took a full pipe cleaner, glued it underneath part of the ribbon that's in the middle there. I hot glued it, and then I'm going to fish that through part of the wreath and onto the back of the wreath form and tie it off in the back so it's secure. So once I get it all tied off in the back, I'm just going to fluff it out a little bit, and I just kind of manipulate it just so that I have it as fluffy as I can get. For the center of my bow, I'm going to glue a button. I've been holding on to this button for a while till I could find something to go with it, and it just fits perfect here in the middle of my bow. So I'm going to glue that on, and then I take a pink button and I glue that on top of the green button, and then this project is complete.
Turn up. You better be there when I shake. Watch me rockin' if I can't stop. If I should fall, just go ahead. Go and catch me, baby. Ooh, I live it. That's my true love, true to love. Ooh, I love it. Crank it up, yeah. Turn it up on a higher level. Turn it up, we got this.
So I'm going to be creating a sunflower wreath for today, and I'm using a new wreath form that I found at the Dollar Tree. So this is a round wreath form. You're also going to need some styrofoam circles, some zip ties, and some nautical rope. And then my deco mesh and these little rubber bands came from Hobby Lobby. So this wreath form has tons of little holes in it, and when I did my research to find out like what you make with this, it's designed, I think, primarily to make flower wreaths. Let me know down in the comments if you've ever used this and if you've ever seen it used for something different than a flower. But this deco mesh is more of a plastic deco mesh, and we're going to cut it into 10 by 10 inch squares. So this deco mesh is 10 inches. We're cutting it at 10 inches, so that makes it a 10 by 10 square. So when I go to fold my petals, I'm just going to take one corner and fold it up to the other corner. I realized when I started doing this that my square was not even. So this is the first time I've ever used this method and the first time I've ever made this kind of wreath. So it's kind of a learning curve for me here, but you definitely want to match those up as close as you possibly can. So then we're going to take one of these tiny little rubber bands, and if you have kids or grandkids, you might have seen them making bracelets out of these, but you can find them in the kids crafting area at Hobby Lobby. I think they also sell these at Walmart, and I'm sure they probably sell them at Joann's or Michael's. But we're just going to tie them off down here at the bottom and make like a little stem. We're going to make 18 of these petals to go around the outside of the wreath frame. I went every other circle, so if you want to have more of these petals, you definitely could make more and go every single one. I feel like the very outer ring, you don't need to have as many because it gets filled up with the other petals. So as we go around, we're going to just continue to do the same thing and making little stems at the very bottom of the petal. Now that we have all 18 of them made, we're going to use our zip ties and we're going to go through the bottom of the wreath. So you want one side on each of the circles, and then you're going to tighten that as tight as you possibly can on the little stem that we made with the petals. So these Dollar Tree zip ties are not as sturdy as some of the other zip ties that I've used that my husband kind of gets and has in the garage. But I wanted to make this as much of a Dollar Tree wreath as I could, and so that's why I went ahead and picked these up. But they still worked great, and if you can't find zip ties anywhere else, they work in a pinch. I wanted to find these smaller zip ties, and I know that the Dollar Tree has sold those in the past, and my Dollar Tree just didn't have the smaller ones. But anyway, any zip tie will do here. So you're just going to thread it into those holes and making sure that they are threaded through the bottom, and then you're going to zip it tight and then trim it off. So I like to trim my zip ties with a wire cutter. I find that it cuts it much easier than scissors. So definitely there's a lot of zip ties involved in this wreath. So you're going to want to have something that's going to cut it much easier than scissors. So we're going to do these petals all around the outside of the wreath form. They don't end up matching up very well, as you're going to see here in a little bit as we move on to our next color. I don't know if that is just because it's a Dollar Tree wreath form like this, or if they don't match up, period, because I know that there are some other brands of these circular wreath forms. So I'm using some buffalo check mesh here. This is the same kind. It's a plastic mesh. This was my favorite mesh of the day. I had so much fun working with this. I kind of wish that I had added 2 sections of this color in the wreath. I only added 1 section, but I definitely think the wreath could have benefited from 2, and we'll talk about that later as we get to the yellow part. So we're going to cut these again 10 inches, and the mesh is 10 inches, so 10 by 10 square. And I actually make 17 of these because we're going to go on the next ring of the wreath, and we're filling in any of the blank sections around the black part. So basically what that means is I'm going to thread my zip tie into the bottom, and then I'm going to place my petal in between 2 of the black petals. Now, I was following the same pattern that I did on the black one, but I found that they didn't quite match up. If you can see on the left-hand side, there is more space between my petals than there is on the right-hand side. So, I don't know if I counted wrong or if I just didn't space them correctly, but as I was counting, I figured I did. So, it could just be the wreath circles don't match up. But you don't really need to worry about that because you're just going to place your petal, your next color petal, in between the solid colored petal. Because the idea is to have none of the gray wreath form showing. So we're doing the same process. We're going to take our zip tie going through the bottom, then we're going to attach our deco mesh and then pull it as tight as you can with the zip tie. And what I found also with these zip ties is some of them would not move. I had to use my teeth to get it to actually move, which I know, keep your teeth, but anyway, that was the only thing I could get to make it kind of cinch together. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and continue that process all around this wreath form until we have 1 layer of our black and white deco mesh. Now, I am measuring kind of with my center part to see how much of the yellow deco mesh I needed. This is where I think it would have benefited 1 more layer of the black and white buffalo check mesh, because this yellow deco mesh is kind of disappointing. So I don't know, pause the video here for a second, but I felt like this was very sheer deco mesh, and so it was hard to get the coverage over the gray. Also, this is not as sturdy as the plastic deco mesh, and so as you can see me cutting it here, it is not a 10x10 or a 10 by 10 square because it's moving. I got these weird shapes when I went to make the petals, but I continued on because I was going to finish this and show you guys exactly how it ended up turning out. Now, I kind of wish in hindsight that I had used some burlap here because I think that that would have turned out really beautiful. So I do have 1 more of these wreath forms, and I forgot to mention that at the beginning, but this is the larger one. They also sell a smaller version of the same wreath form at the Dollar Tree. I picked up two, one of these large and one of the small, and I think I'm going to go back and get another large one because I think I need a take two of this wreath. Let me know down in the comments if you guys want to see a take two and maybe using burlap or a more sturdier deco mesh. Let me know if you guys want to see it. I'm down for it. So I'm doing the same process, and I'm going to just use my zip ties again. Now this time, because the deco mesh was so sheer, I decided I needed to go every circle. So I'm like, I don't know how to explain that a little bit, but I'm reusing a circle. So if you can see right here, I'm going to put my zip tie in, and then I'm going to pull it in through the one that already had a zip tie in it. On the other two layers of the deco mesh, I did not do that. Now, because I went so close together here, I did end up using this full roll of deco mesh. And honestly, I could have probably used a little bit more, or I could have done another layer of black or another layer of the buffalo check. But I felt like the coverage of the yellow just isn't very good because it's so sheer. But anyways, we're going to go this full circle of the yellow deco mesh, and then when we come back, I'll show you that it is kind of needing some extra space in there. So here we are back from that section of the yellow, and as you can see, it's pretty sparse, and I have a lot of spaces even though I went like each of those circles. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the next row of the dots, and I'm going to put them in between the yellow petals. So just like I did the process of the black and white deco mesh and the black deco mesh, now I'm going to do that with just yellow on yellow. So I'm kind of overlapping them on top of each other. I only had enough deco mesh to do these two rows. So again, I either needed more of the yellow to fill it in just a little bit more, or another row of one of those other two colors. I did have leftover deco mesh of the black and buffalo check, so I definitely could have done some more layers there. So now I'm just going to do the same process using my zip ties again, and I am kind of spacing this out a little bit more because I was worried I wasn't going to have enough of the yellow petals. So same process here, feeding your zip tie from the bottom into the two dots and then securing it really tight and moving on to the next petal. So for the middle of our wreath, we're going to use a styrofoam round that I also picked up at the Dollar Tree. They come two in a pack. And then we're using some nautical rope also from the Dollar Tree. So you're just going to use a lot of hot glue to get this to stick. I have a immensely hot glue gun and it was having a hard time getting the nautical rope to stick to the styrofoam. And usually my glue gun like melts everything. So I was kind of surprised that it was having such a hard time. So definitely give yourself some time to like hold on to it and press it down into the styrofoam. Also, make sure that you are in the middle of your round. I realized I wasn't, so mine not sticking kind of worked to my advantage because I was able to move it over and make sure it was in the middle. Now, when I do these like nautical rope wrapping things, I like to make sure that I put glue in each of the sections. I know not everybody does that, so it's definitely a personal preference, but I don't want mine to come apart or come unraveled, and so I do try to add as much glue as possible. Make sure though that your glue is not seeping up into the top because then you'll be able to see it and you don't want to be able to see any of the glue. Make sure you cover the entire circle, even on the sides, to make sure that you can't see it when it's hanging up. And then you're going to want to use copious amounts of glue here to stick it to the wreath form. My wreath form seemed a little warped, so I think that might have been the problem with why it was having a hard time sticking to it. But you're going to want to make sure you use a lot of glue here and hold it super tight so it adheres to the plastic wreath form. So here is the final look of this wreath. I think it's classy, beautiful. I love how it turned out. You guys let me know down below if you like how it looks. I definitely think a ×2 or a second chance here at this wreath form is needed because I had some difficulty using it and I was a little disappointed in the sheer deco mesh. So this project is inspired by a pin I saw on Pinterest, and so we're going to start out with a Dollar Tree wreath form and some Dollar Tree ribbon, and this is just the plain burlap ribbon from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to wrap it around the entire wreath form. It takes me a little over 2 of the spools of ribbon to cover the entire wreath. So once I get the entire wreath covered, then I'm going to take this pre-made bow that also came from the Dollar Tree. It's in the 4th of July area, and I'm just going to glue that to the top of this wreath. Once I have this ribbon, or this bow, sorry, glued to the top, then I'm going to take this star hanger that also came from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to take it apart off of the burlap ribbon that it was hanging on. I do save the burlap ribbon to use as a hanger, as you'll see in a little bit. So once I have those off, I'm going to take some jute twine, and I was going to try and glue the twine to the back of the stars and then tie them onto the wreath. Once I had them all glued, and I did put a generous amount of glue onto that twine. I think maybe the twine I was using wasn't thick enough, because when I tried to just tie it onto the wreath, they popped off. So I went ahead and just glued them onto the wreath and then flipped it over and tied them to the back as well. So I don't know if that was a double step there, but I like the idea of tying them on so you could take it off later. But that just wasn't working out for me. So anyway, once I get them all tied on there, then I'm going to take that burlap hanger that they were glued onto originally. I'm going to glue it to the top of the bow so that I have a hanger, and then this project is complete.
This California weather, it's like 90 degrees. It's making me hot, and he has the same effect on me. It's just something about the way that he's making me feel. My insides are out, I just wanna shout his name. My body's giving up on me, cause I don't know what to do with my fingertips. I wanna run up through his hair, but I'm trying not to stare. I get a little starstruck when I see him. I couldn't hate him even if I tried. Am I a little crazy to believe that I could wake up with him by my side?
For this video, we're going to be using some deco mesh from the Dollar Tree, and we're going to be creating a 4th of July wreath. So I'm going to use 6 packages of deco mesh wreath. I'm going to be using 3 packages of the white and 3 packages of the red. So I use a ruler to measure out my deco mesh, and you can either use a mat or a ruler if you have a mat. I have both. This particular video, I was just using a ruler, but I measure out 6 inches, and then I go ahead and cut my deco mesh bundle. I'm going to go ahead and cut all 6 of the packages to the same length, and then I also have red, and I'm going to cut the red deco mesh the exact same way. This is going to be a rolling method or a bundle method. There are several different types of methods that you can do for wreath making. This one does seem to fray a little bit more than other methods, and the Dollar Tree mesh does seem to fray more than maybe mesh from Hobby Lobby. But once I get all of the white ones cut, then I go ahead and cut the red ones the exact same way, measuring them to be 6 inches and cutting them into little bundles. Once I have them all cut out, then I'm going to take the individual pieces that I have cut, and I'm going to use a pipe cleaner. I like to take my pipe cleaner, bend it in half, and then cut it in half, and only use half of the pipe cleaner. Now, depending on like how your hands are, if you have mobility issues, sometimes it's easier to have a longer pipe cleaner, but I tend to cinch my pieces really tight so I never have any problems with them going on the wreath frame. Some people cut the pipe cleaners into thirds. I feel like that is too little for me, but that is up to you. It does give you less scraping or scratching on the back if you're going to hang this up. So definitely you want your pipe cleaners to bend in. But right now I'm taking 2 bundles of the white and 1 bundle of red, and I'm going to cinch it really hard there in the middle, and then I'm going to twist. And I twisted several times to make sure that they are secure, and then that is going to be 1 bundle. I'm going to do that again with 2 reds and 1 white, and I'm going to alternate them so that when I put them on the wreath, I'm also going to alternate them. 1 with 2 bundles of white and 1 red, and then 1 with 2 bundles of red and 1 white. To attach them to the frame, you're just going to put the pipe cleaner in between the 2 middle rungs and twist several times to make sure that it's securely on there. And then you're going to be able to see the pipe cleaner at first, but that is okay because once we get all the bundles on there, you're not going to be able to see the pipe cleaner. That's why I don't really care what color they are, as it really doesn't matter. You can also use zip ties here, which will give you a much more clean finish backing. But that is an option. You can get the zip ties at the Dollar Tree as well. So here I am just intertwining my bundles, like I said, 2 whites and 1 red, 2 reds and 1 white, and I'm going to continue to do that into the first section of the wreath. So I go ahead and put about 10 bundles per section of the wreath, and this is about maybe about a third of the wreath now is completed, and you're already starting to not be able to see the pipe cleaner. I like to fluff as I go, because this becomes a really full wreath. So you're just going to continue that process all the way around the rest of the wreath, going with 10 bundles per section. Here are all the bundles completed together, and as you can see, they're very tightly in there. Like I mentioned before, if you're going to hang this on a door or like put it down as a centerpiece or something like that, you want to make sure the backing is not going to scratch your door, so fold in your pipe cleaners or cut them down so they're not hanging out and scratching. So here is our sign that we also got at the Dollar Tree. I'm going to use one of these filler pieces to glue right in the middle where the hole on the sign is, and that way we won't be able to tell that there was a hanging piece there in the middle. One of my favorite tricks to kind of hide holes, especially from the Dollar Tree signs, if it looks aesthetically okay, I use a lot of like little pieces to glue in there so that you can't tell there was an actual hole there other than filling it in with wood filler. So now I'm going to take some pipe cleaners again, and I'm going to assemble them onto the back of my sign. This gives me a really easy way to attach the sign to my wreath because I'm just going to thread those in between my deco mesh. So I'm using 3 pipe cleaners today, 2 at the top and 1 at the bottom. These are full-size pipe cleaners just to make sure that I have enough space to go through the wreath. You can always clip this off in the back once you get it to where you like it. The one other really nice part about using pipe cleaners here instead of hot gluing it to the wreath is that you can always take these pieces off and put different pieces on if you want to, and that way it becomes more versatile. So a generous amount of hot glue needs to go there to make sure that they are adhered really nicely. So along with the little sign, I'm going to attach that to our bigger sign here in a minute, and I also needed to make sure I put some filler pieces on the top of that. So here we are with our pipe cleaners, and we're ready to thread that through the wreath form, and I just sort of move it apart, giving myself some space, and then I put the pipe cleaner through the wreath frame, and I'm attaching it just the same way I did the deco mesh. So I'm going to do that for all 3 pipe cleaners to make sure that I have a secure hold in the back, and then while you're putting them through the wreath frame, you want to make sure that the front is also centered, because if you're not paying attention, it can get off-centered or not covering up the hole that's there, and that is the whole purpose of the sign, is to cover up the hole that's in the middle. So once I get that attached to the wreath, then I'm going to pick which one of the 3 little pieces from the Dollar Tree sign that I want to use to attach to the bottom. So I go ahead and pick this blue one because the Let Freedom Ring sign also has a lot of blue in it, and the rest of the deco mesh is red. So I felt like the red sign was a little bit too much red, where this one really adds like a nice touch with the blue and gives it some more blue accents. So I do go ahead and glue some pipe cleaners on the back of this one as well and attach it right underneath so it looks like it is hanging on to or glued onto the other sign. You could also glue it there if you'd rather do that. Either way would be fine, and it totally just depends on what you're wanting to do with this and if you're wanting to like take it out and put a new one in. I have to be honest, after I made this wreath, I never did take the pieces apart, but you know, you totally could if that was something you wanted to do. So I feed the pipe cleaners through, and then I just make sure that they are super tight in the back so that it doesn't fall off. And you can clip those pipe cleaners off in the back, the long ones that we've used to attach the signs, just so that they are not rubbing on your door or wall wherever you have this hanging. So I'm going to take another one of my filler pieces, well actually 2, one for each side of this sign because this had 2 holes in it, and it also matches the middle of our sign. And then once I get that all together, then this wreath is complete. I think this turned out super cute, and if you're a first-time wreath maker or someone who's kind of scared to make a wreath, this is a really easy wreath to make because you're just going to put deco mesh, 2 signs, and some filler. I went ahead and put the filler all around the wreath to give it an extra added touch. So the Dollar Tree has some really adorable vintage Halloween stuff out, and if you know me at all, you know vintage Halloween is my jam. So I had to pick up some, and I wanted to make a wreath. So I have never used one of these square wreath forms, and I thought I would try it out. Let me just tell you guys, this wreath is huge. So I went ahead and got 6 bundles of the deco mesh. That's what I normally get for a round wreath, and I was going to see, you know, just start with that and see how much I needed. So I'm using just this cutting mat that has a ruler on it, and I'm cutting my mesh at 6 inches. Now I know there's a lot of people who use rotary cutters. I even tried to use a rotary cutter this time. Either my blade is dull or I just am not doing it correctly, but it took a lot longer for me to use the rotary blade instead of the scissors, so I just use the scissors. If you have the rotary blade and you want to do that instead, you're more than welcome, but you're going to cut all 6 packages of your deco mesh to 6 inches and then put them into bundles like I have here. So I'm just using some pipe cleaners from the Dollar Tree. I'm going to cut them in half. All I do is bend them in half. You can use scissors or wire cutters and just trim them. So I do a really easy method. All we're doing is rolling here. So if this is like you're intimidated by wreath making, this is the simplest wreath you could start with. So all you're going to do is roll your deco mesh into a little bundle. As you can see, I'm just going from one side to the other, rolling it up and cinching it in my hand. Once I get 3 bundles, I'm going to take my pipe cleaner and I put it around the bundles, and I pull super tight, if you can see that here. So I use my fingers, I pull it back, it's super tight, and then I twist my pipe cleaners. Now, sometimes it can get a little difficult using the smaller pipe cleaners, especially when you get to the wreath form. If you are someone who has hand problems, you know, I do too, sometimes a longer pipe cleaner will work, and that's okay. You can trim it off in the back when you're done. So one more time, I'm going to show you that technique. I'm just rolling one piece and cinching it, and then I'm rolling a second piece and cinching it, and then I'm going to roll this third piece, cinch it up in my hand all together to make one bundle. Then I'm going to take my pipe cleaner and I'm going to wrap it around, and then I pull super tight so that there's like a space where my finger is in between the mesh and the pipe cleaner, and then I twist. So I have a super tight hold on my mesh. I'm going to do that for all of the deco mesh that I cut out. And then I'm ready to attach it to my wreath form. So like I said, I've never used this square wreath form before. Wasn't really sure how much of the deco mesh I was going to need. I decided to do the 2 outside rings and attach my deco mesh there. I don't know. I think if I make another one of these, I might try the inside rings because I felt like you could see a little bit of it. I had to kind of go back and fill in some of the areas. It could just be that I didn't put enough deco mesh when I was going around because the little rings in between, they were kind of weird, and it's possible that I just didn't put him close enough to that. But all we're going to do is alternate between black and orange. So I tie on a black bundle, then I tie on an orange bundle, then a black bundle. You get the idea, and we're just going to go this first length so I can show you how many pieces there were. So after I counted, I believe there are 14 bundles there to go across. So I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of them. This is what I got when I did my 6. So I still had one piece of the wreath that was left over. So I took one more bundle of orange, one more bundle of black, and I just did the same thing, cut them out, rolled them together, and filled in the rest of the wreath. So I'm using this truck that is a Halloween, and I didn't show you the front yet, but it's adorable. Like I said, I love vintage Halloween, and they had so many possibilities over there this year for decorating. I was super excited. So I'm just taking 4 full-length pipe cleaners, and I'm gluing them to the 4 corners of our sign. I make sure that I have a generous amount of glue on these because sometimes they can pop off. So I put glue down on the sign, then I stick my pipe cleaner in the glue, and then I put glue over it just to make sure that it's really stuck on there well. So now I'm going to lay it on top of the wreath, and I'm going to kind of dig in there till I find the wreath form, and I put all 4 corners through part of the wreath. Then I'm going to flip it over so that I can attach it to the wreath form. So I was having a really hard time getting a good angle of this wreath so that you guys could see it, because I'm not lying, guys, this is like the biggest wreath. That wreath form, it didn't seem like it was that much bigger than the circle, but I think it is. So anyway, here we are. I have it attached to the 4 corners. I'm just twisting, and I make sure that I secure it really well to the wreath frame. So I don't add a lot of things to this wreath. I end up only adding some ribbon, and I make a couple bows here. Let me know if you would add anything else. I couldn't think of anything. Later on I thought maybe some plastic spiders would look really cute in there. I don't know. I love this truck, and I love the little pumpkin skeleton and cat that's in there. So for me, like, sometimes, you know, less is more. I kind of tend to be a minimalist sometimes. But you guys let me know, what would you put on the wreath? Like, would you add anything? Would you leave it the same way? I don't know. I think it's cute. You guys let me know. So I'm using some buffalo check ribbon and some chevron ribbon from the Dollar Tree, and then I'm going to use this striped ribbon that I got at Hobby Lobby. I loved this striped ribbon. It really said vintage Halloween to me last year when I picked it up, so I definitely had to use it again this year. But we're just going to make another messy bow, so I'm using some twine. I'm just going to tie it super tight in the back. It's going to cinch up like this. You're going to fluff it out once you get your knot tied in here in the back. And so to fluff out a messy bow, you're just going to kind of flatten the middle part as best as you can to like fan out the other ribbons. And then I'm just going to dovetail all the ends again for our high end look. So for this bow, I decided to go ahead and wrap the middle a little bit. Once I got that wrapped with another piece of the ribbon, then I go ahead and I'm going to use a zip tie this time. So I dig through my wreath and I find the wreath form, and then what I did was I used my zip tie, went through the back of the bow, and then I cinched it on the other side. So I tighten it super tight here, and then I just fluff it out, and I go ahead and trim off any excess of the the zip tie. So I decided to go ahead and make another ribbon to go at the bottom of this wreath, and I'm using some Halloween ribbon from the Dollar Tree. I haven't been lucky enough to find any more Dollar Tree Halloween ribbon. I did find some fall ribbon this year, but I didn't find any Halloween ribbon. So all I'm doing is my crisscross bow here again. If you missed my tutorial on how to do that from my last video, I will link that up here in the cards. But all we're doing is crisscrossing and then accordion folding, and then we're going to use some twine. I just wrap mine pretty tightly around the middle a few times, and then I tie it off in a knot on the back. Once I have it tied off in the back, and then I go ahead and dovetail the ends, and then I'm going to fluff out the bow part. Now I use two ribbons here, which are like a witch's hat and then the Halloween pumpkin, and I wanted the witch's hat to show a little bit, so I did dovetail my pumpkin a little bit shorter than the witch's hat. But once I zip tie this one on, then this project is complete.
Just let it out, I'm by your side now. Just hold on a bit more, 'cause I know you only see the rain, not the rainbow. Deep down I know you're strong. Give them hell, baby, prove them wrong.
So we're going to start with 6 rolls of the deco mesh that came from the Dollar Tree, and we're using this turquoise blue color and a black color. And then you're going to need a ruler, and I always measure my deco mesh to be about 6 inches. And so you're just going to do that for all 6 rolls of the deco mesh.
Down by the sea.
So this video today is part of the Sunday Fun Day Challenge, which is one of my most favorite challenges that I do each month, and it's so fun because everyone can kind of bring whatever they want to the video. So definitely check out the videos down below, and it is put on by my dear friends Deco Easy and Ginger Chick Rehab. So their channels will be linked in the description box below, and both of them have so much fun and unique styles going on there, so make sure you check that out. Once I cut out the pieces, I just kind of stack them in a pile, and that way I'm ready to just grab them when I'm going to put them together on the wreath. And then I'm just going to do this too for the black, and doing the same thing, we're going to cut them all out and then stack them up so they're ready to go when it's time to assemble the wreath.
I step into the water.
So I have a bundle of pipe cleaners here that I picked up at the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to fold them in half and cut so that I get 2 pieces out of each pipe cleaner, and those are going to be the things that I tie my deco mesh on to the wreath. Now there's lots of different ways to do deco mesh, and this is just the best way that I like to do my wreaths because they end up being fuller, and you can kind of manipulate how much you put into it or how little you put into it, depending on if you add ribbons or whatever into your deco mesh. We're ready to put our deco mesh together before we put it on the wreath, and I'm going to take a blue bundle and roll it up, and then I'm going to take 2 black pieces and roll those up, and then I'm going to have a bundle of 3, and I'm going to take one of those pipe cleaners and I'm going to wrap it around this bundle of 3 really tightly, and then I'm going to twist. And I'm going to do that for all of my deco mesh before I assemble it onto the wreath form. So I'm going to create two different bundles. So I have one bundle that has two blacks and one blue, and then I have another bundle that has one black and two blues. When I do that, it kind of distributes the color of blue and black all the way through my wreath, and it evens out the amount of deco mesh that I use per bundle. So because I have 3 of each color, this kind of evens them out and they have the same amount of bundles per color. So this is kind of a tedious process, but once you've done it a few times, it does go pretty fast. But I recommend watching TV or something just kind of to make the time go faster as you're rolling. And then we're almost ready to assemble our wreath. I'ma grow you white roses, so you can learn to be kind. So we're ready to put our bundles together onto our wreath form, and we're just going to use those 2 inner metal pieces of the wreath. So we're going to take one bundle and the end of that pipe cleaner that we have sticking out, and we're going to wrap it around those 2 inside metal pieces on the wreath. And we're going to pull pretty tightly, and then we're going to wrap it around with the pipe cleaner a few times so it's on there pretty tight and held securely. We are going to alternate our bundles. So the first bundle I put on had the 2 blacks and 1 blue, and then the next bundle I put on is going to have the 2 blues and 1 black, and I'm just going to keep going all around my wreath that way. I want to have about 8 bundles per section. So if you're looking at the wreath form, there is some some metal pieces in between each section, and I want to have about 8 into each of the sections. So as you saw when we were doing all the prep work for this, that I was using like very colorful pipe cleaners, and it's okay because the pipe cleaners do not show after you start to get more and more of your bundles on there. So at the beginning it's kind of scary because you're thinking, oh my goodness, the pipe cleaners are going to show, but by the time you get all of the bundles put onto the wreath, you cannot see the pipe cleaners anymore. So it does not matter what color pipe cleaners you use. So here we are about halfway done, and we're going to go ahead and go around the second half of the wreath, and we're just going to follow the same steps that we've been doing for the beginning of the wreath. So if you're liking today's video, I would love it if you gave me a thumbs up, and let me know in the comments below, do you decorate scary for Halloween, or are you more of a cutesy kind of Halloween decorator? This wreath today was actually put together for a friend, so I'm more of a cutesy kind of vintage decorator, but she loves Halloween and this was made for her. So here we have all the bundles put together on our wreath, and I'm just going to go ahead and fluff it out. The one thing about Dollar Tree mesh is it tends to shed a lot, and so I'm going through the wreath and kind of picking some parts off of it. I know that there are some people who take a lighter and kind of go around to thin the edges. I'm not brave enough to do that, so I haven't had a lot of problems with my wreaths, but they do tend to fray, so just keep that in mind if you're using that mesh and you want to take kind of the stringy parts off before you start putting the main pieces to your wreath.
Down by the sea, at the edge of the water, the coming waves kiss my feet.
So here we have the parts that we're going to put on the outside of our wreath, our decorations I guess, and I picked up this skull sign and this little skull hangy thing that had hats and skulls on it, and I got both of those at the Dollar Tree. And I'm going to take apart the hangy part that has the skulls and the hats on it, and I kind of play around with it. You'll see in a little bit to see which parts I want to put on it, but I finally end up in the end using just the hats, and so I just have the skulls for a later project. So I'm going to make a few bows to put on my wreath, and I'm trying out this deluxe bow maker that I picked up from Michael's, and I had seen a few other crafters on YouTube using it, and I thought I would try it out. It took me a little bit to figure out how to actually do the bows on here, but once I finally figured it out, I was really happy with how the bow turned out. It's really cute. My one suggestion would be, if you're going to pick this up and use it, that the ribbon you end up using is definitely a wired ribbon, at least starting out, because this is only the couple times I've used it. But as I'm making this wreath, the yellow ribbon you'll see in a little bit, it's not as wired as this purple ribbon, and I had a lot of trouble trying to make a bow that I actually liked out of it. But the purple and pink ribbon, they turned out so cute using this bow maker. So the purple ribbon actually came from Hobby Lobby, and the yellow ribbon actually came from Hobby Lobby as well, but the pink ribbon came from the Dollar Tree, and it's just the wired burlap ribbon that they sell there. So the one part of this bow maker that I didn't really like was that wooden dowel that's over by my arm, and it's supposed to be a ribbon holder, and you're supposed to put the spool on it, but when I tried to do that, it really just gets in the way. So I ended up just putting the spools in front of me and winding it around in front of me and doing that. So I also try out this ribbon that doesn't have any wire in it, and it just isn't working out, so I put that aside, and then I'm using that Dollar Tree pink burlap ribbon like I mentioned before, and then I'm going to just take it off the bow maker with that pipe cleaner, tie it together, and then fluff out the bow and dovetail the ends to give it the more high-end boutique look. I'm also going to make a smaller bow out of this yellow ribbon, and I end up putting some pink burlap ribbon with it as well when I put it on the wreath. So we're ready to get our parts ready to assemble onto the wreath, and so I'm just using some pipe cleaners, hot gluing them to the back, and then I'm going to thread them through the deco mesh to secure it in place onto the wreath. And then I'm going to do the same thing with my bows, using those same pipe cleaners and attaching them to the wreath, and then I'm just going to add a few other elements like little skulls and the hats from that other piece that we had earlier, and I'm going to glue those onto the wreath, and then we are finished. Here's the final look of our wreath, and I think it turned out so wonderful. I love all the bright colors for Day of the Dead. Even though it's a Halloween celebration, it's fun to still have those pinks and blues and yellows in your home. So here are the inspiration pieces for our first project, and I found these on the Wayfair website. They are two kind of different types of pine cone wreaths, and we're going to create something that is similar but a little bit more with a modern twist. So to start out with, I'm just going to put some pine cones in this tin, and I'm using some gold Rust-Oleum spray paint, and then I just flip them over and keep spraying until I get the desired look I want. It took about 3 coats to get them all covered with this gold spray paint, because it's kind of light once you get it all on there. But I do follow the same process with the navy Rust-Oleum paint and the burgundy Rust-Oleum paint. So here's our bucket full of gold pine cones, and then our basket full of burgundy pine cones, and then we have another basket full of navy pine cones. So to start out with, I'm going to use this grapevine wreath, and At first I tried to hot glue the pine cones on, but that was just not working. Like I tried to put the hot glue on the pine cones, I tried to put the hot glue on the wreath, and it's just too many holes in all the areas to get a really good firm hold from the hot glue. So once I realized that was not going to work out, I decided to go ahead and use floral wire. So I just took several pieces, I cut them, I measured around the wreath, and then what I did was I put it around the pine cone and put it inside the pine cone so that you can't tell at all that there's a piece of wire there. I twisted it around the back, and then I went ahead and stuck it onto the wreath. And then I go ahead, once I have it in the desired spot on the wreath, I flip over the wreath and I secure it in the back. Now, a few of my pieces weren't quite long enough, so what I did was I just got it to where they could go, and then I wrapped it around just some pieces of the grapevine wreath, and that seemed to hold really well, and I did that for the entire wreath and pine cone. So this is a little bit of a tedious process, so if you're going to recreate this, just make sure you have a TV show or a podcast. I've really been into podcasts lately. I love to listen to the Dateline podcast, so if you're a podcast person, let me know down in the comments what's your favorite podcast. So once I do that, I go ahead and just do all of the pine cones around the whole wreath in the desired grouping. So I was just going like every other one, like in a diagonal of blue and burgundy and gold. So now I have these leather pumpkins and leather leaves that I picked up at Hobby Lobby over in their fall section, and they are 40% off, and I'm just going to go around in a little pattern with my leaves. And right now I'm not gluing them on, I just am situating them in the place I want them to be before I glue them on. That way, if I don't like it or I want it to go someplace else, I can always move it. That's a really big tip. Don't glue until you're confident that's where you want it to be. So then I just go around with my leather pumpkins and I do the same thing. And then once I get them into the desired area on the wreath that I want, I'm going to go back in with my hot glue gun and I'm going to secure them down, and then this project is complete. So for all the projects today, we're going to be using this paper pack that I picked up at Hobby Lobby. It is by Paper Studio, and so it did happen to be on sale this week. I know they go through a cycle where it's every other week, so you can wait maybe a week or so, check it out, and then you can get it for half off as well. So I just picked out about 8 different sheets of paper, and these first set of cones that we're going to make, I'm going to cut into 6x6 squares. You get 4 squares out of each piece of paper. They look kind of small at first. I was like, but actually they work out just fine. So then I'm using some foam board from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just creating a circle. Mine ends up being more of an oval, really. It's not quite a full circle shape, but it doesn't really matter. No one's going to see the underneath side of it. If you're worried about it being a perfect circle, you could always trace something, but then you're going to draw a circle inside as well. So once I got those all cut out, and I took the scrapbook paper that I had cut out, and all I did was roll it into a cone shape. I'm using hot glue here, and I'm just gluing down the bottom of the cone, and then I'm going to glue the bottom edges together. So there's going to be some spaces up towards the top, but we want the bottom part where the coney type shape is to be flush together down there. So we're just going to follow that line of the circle, and we're going to go all around the foam piece. So I'm just showing you, you can see here that there is some big spaces in between. The thing that I kind of got my inspiration from online, it said that they just glued smaller pieces on top of those. I didn't really like that, so what I did was once I got the full cone circle glued on, I just went back in with some hot glue and some more of this sized cone shapes, and I just filled them in through all the spaces that were showing. So then when I'm all done, I won't have any space here. I used about, I would say, 19 to 20 cone shapes, and my circle was about 14 inches in diameter. So you could go a smaller size here if you want. So here I'm just showing you how I rolled it up. The tighter you roll it, the more of a cone shape you get. And again, I just used hot glue, and I only glued the tail of the paper on to the rest of the paper. I didn't put any other kind of adhesive there. So these are 4 by 6 pieces of paper that I rolled into the cone shape as well, and then I'm just gluing those on top of the other cones. So we have more dimension here, and I went about every 2 cones, I glued another cone on top. Now I'm taking this pumpkin that I picked up at the Dollar Tree, and I'm using some folk art chalk paint, and I'll list down in the description box which paints I used, and I'll have a link to Amazon if you can get them there. But I'm using kind of non-traditional colors here just because my scrapbook paper had some more blues and greens in it, so I thought it would be fun to make my pumpkin a blue and green color as well. So I have the green color kind of on the underneath side, and then the blue as the cutout pops here in this piece of wood. So this, like I said, did come from the Dollar Tree. I think this is a really nice wood piece. They have really some great pieces out this fall at the Dollar Tree as far as like decorating goes. Some really fun fall and Halloween pieces. So make sure you go check that out. So this ribbon also came from the Dollar Tree. It's one of my favorite patterns that they bring out every year. I just do a crisscross and then I fold, and then I'm going to take some twine and I'm going to wrap it around the middle of the bow, and then I tie it in a knot. So it gives it a really tight look, and you get a really fun bow shape, and it's not really difficult to make. You can hot glue the middle as well. The only thing about hot gluing it down in the middle is then you really need to put something over the top of it, because it's pretty noticeable when you use the hot glue as opposed to the twine, because once we tie it really tight here in the middle, it really doesn't need anything to sit on top of it unless you want there to be something on top of it. And for this bow, I didn't glue anything into the center of it. So I'm going to cut off the twine. I do go ahead and dovetail my ends, and then I'm going to use my hot glue to glue it onto the top of the pumpkin. So my scissors were getting kind of dull, and I didn't realize that when I dovetailed them. So it's a little bit of a rustic dovetail, if that's even a thing, but I just went ahead and went with it. So I just glue that bow to the top, and then we're going to take this pumpkin wood cutout and we're going to glue it to the top of our cones. So where our cone wreath had the hole in the middle, we are going to take this pumpkin and just using hot glue we're going to sit it. You don't have to smash it because remember this is paper, so you're just going to sit it kind of gently onto the paper and press down. Now these cones are a really tight hold on this foam board, so you should have a really good hold. I do go ahead and put a piece of twine on the back, and then this project is complete.
I wanna do it all with you by my side. If you're in, meet me here tonight. Be brave and come along. I'll be your ride. Promise we don't need no brake lights. We can travel the world, so just say yes.
So I've never made a paper wreath before. Let me know down in the comments if you've ever made a paper wreath. I want to try rosettes next time. I saw some really cool ideas online that had some rosette wreaths, and I'd never seen something like that before. So I want to try that maybe in a future video. Let me know if you're loving the idea of paper and wreaths or just paper projects in general, and I'll see if I can come up with some more of those. Let me know down in the comments maybe what you would like to see using scrapbook paper. If you're loving the projects today, make sure you hit that like button. It really helps my video be seen by other people. And let's get back to the other projects. This is a really simple technique. All I'm doing is taking ribbon and wrapping it around the wreath form. This is a 12-inch wreath form from the Dollar Tree, and this is also Dollar Tree ribbon. So this took me about a roll and a half of ribbon to cover this whole metal wreath frame. I'm also going to take a foam green wreath form from the Dollar Tree. That is a mouthful, and I'm going to cover it with this brown and orange plaid ribbon and do the same technique, and then I just glued one on top of the other. So then I took some picks from the Dollar Tree, I cut them all apart, and I'm using some twine, and I'm just going to tie them into a bundle. That way I don't have the bottom stems to worry about when I glue it onto my wreath, and then I get a full bundle but without all the excess stuff. So then I'm just going to place it where I want it to be, and then I'm just going to put a generous amount of hot glue on the back, and then I'm going to press firmly onto the wreath. So it did have to hold it here for a little bit just to make sure that it was stuck on there. So then I took these leaf and acorn cutouts that they have at the Dollar Tree. They are like a garland that you can do or make ornaments out of them. And I'm just going to cover them with some scrapbook paper from my scrapbook pack. All I did was trace around and glue it on top. And then I'm going to make another simple bow. This is another ribbon from the Dollar Tree. I do fold it in half, and then I accordion it together. And then again, using my twine, I'm just going to wrap it around the middle so that I have something to hold on to. And then I just tie it in a really tight knot. Once I get it all tied up like that, I'm going to go ahead and take my scissors and dovetail the ends, and then I glue it onto the top of the bundle. And then I'm going to take the little cutouts that I covered with the scrapbook paper, and I'm going to glue them underneath this ribbon. I decided that some of the glue was showing from where I glued both of the wreath forms together, so I took some nautical rope and I'm just going to wrap it around where the two wreath forms come together, and then this project is complete.
Whatever comes next. This or that. Getting drunk on whiskey on a Tuesday night. I'm drinking while I'm by an open fire. Make love or fight. This or that. This or that.
So this is a wreath upcycle. I used to have this wreath hanging in my classroom when I taught elementary, but I don't teach elementary anymore, and so I don't have an apple theme. So I decided to just remove all the apples but keep the raffia and ribbon at the top. So I'm using these Dollar Tree pumpkins. These are amazing. If you can find them in your store, I highly recommend picking them up. I wish I could have found more, but I wasn't lucky enough to. So I'm using my same folk art chalk paint, and I'm just going to cover both of the pumpkins with the chalk paint. So as you see, normally you would trace on the outside, but if I were to flip this pumpkin over, there's a lip there, and when I traced it, I wouldn't have the exact shape that I was looking for. So instead, I just decided to put it on top and trace it out. You're going to have a good lip on the paper when you glue it on, because like I said, there is like a space between there, but that's okay because we're going to use our sanding block and sand it off. So I'm just using a regular Elmer's glue stick. I find that it sticks on the scrapbook paper just fine to wood, and then you don't have all of the wrinkles from Mod Podge. So I just go ahead and make sure that I cover the entire piece with my glue stick, and because I'm a teacher and kind of a glue snob, I only use the Elmer's glue brand. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and glue the piece of paper on and make sure that it's totally dry before I start sanding. So make sure, you can see my paper was kind of moving there, so just make sure you're pulling your sanding block towards you and not away from you. So I'm going to do all this sanding around the side where there is again a lip, but there's like an edge there. You can see as I'm sanding that you can see part of the edge. You want to sand that really good, and once you get you can start to see like it's coming apart, you can just pick up the paper and peel it off. And that's what I love the most about using this sanding technique, especially if there's a lip. You can just peel off the paper and keep going. It gives you a really smooth edge. I'm going to do that for both pumpkins. Then I'm going to take some raffia. This also came from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to tie a little shoelace bow, and I'm going to glue some raffia to the top of both of these pumpkins. I think these turned out so adorable. Let me know down in the comments if you're into traditional colors, or do you like kind of non-traditional fall colors. I'll put a video up above here from last year that I did some pumpkins that were non-traditional colors. I'm into blue, so that's what I always tend to pick, but you can check out the ceramic pumpkins I painted last year right here. So here we are, we're gluing our raffia on, and this is just simple, nothing fancy. You could add buttons here if you wanted, or any other kind of picks here onto it. I wanted the scrapbook paper to be the star of the show, so that's why I just used raffia. So the last step to this is just to glue it to the grapevine wreath, and then this project is complete. So to start with the pieces that we're going to hang on this, I got these wreath forms from Hobby Lobby. They were $3.99, and I also picked up a package of these wood rounds. I believe the wood rounds were like $4.49. So all I'm doing is kind of going around the wreath before gluing so that I can make sure that I like the placement of them, and then I'll go back and glue them down. Then I'm using some Dollar Tree ribbon, and I'm sorry today I didn't actually measure out how much ribbon I used. I'm doing this kind of fold over bow, and I make this bow all the time. Normally though, I glue them, especially if they're smaller bows, but I've been lately really enjoying using some twine to tie them off in the middle. So I just kind of fold it over, make sure I like the amount of ribbon I have, and then I go ahead and make the bow. So I crisscross it, I fold it down, and then I'm going to do like an accordion here, and I'm going to hold it with my thumb and forefinger. Then I'm going to take some twine, and this is just regular twine from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to wrap it around the middle where my finger is holding the bow together. I wrap it about 3 or 4 times, and then I turn it over and I hold it super tight when I let my hand go, and then I'm just going to tie a knot here. So as I am tying it, when I go to cinch the first one, I tie as tight as I possibly can. Then I tie the second part of the knot, and I tie again as tight as I can, and then I go ahead and cut off the excess. I love the way these bows look. They're super easy to make. You can put things in the middle of the bow if you want, or you don't have to. I do 3 different kinds of looks with it today for each project. For this one, I'm just going to leave it as is with the twine in the middle. I'm going to dovetail the ends, and then I'm going to glue it to the wreath. So there are so many things that you can do with this one bow. I just think it's really versatile. It's super easy, and if you're not good at bow making, this is definitely a bow that you can start out with. So I just kind of off center my bow on the wood rounds. This is super simple and rustic, and then this project is complete.
Whatever comes next. Getting drunk on whiskey on a Tuesday night. Drinking where I'm by an open fire. Make love or fight. This or that.
So I'm using another one of those wreath forms from Hobby Lobby, and then I found this package of pine cones. They were super cute. They were just these little tiny pine cones, but what really caught my eye was the copper ones that they had in there. They must have used some spray paint or something. They are really beautiful, so that's really why I ended up buying them. But all I'm going to do is hot glue the pine cones to the outer circle of this wreath, and then I go back in and I hot glue another layer of pine cones to the inner circle of the wreath, just so you won't see any of the cardboard wreath form. Once I do that, I'm ready to do the bow, so I'm going to take 2 ribbons this time, and I'm going to measure. I just went ahead and cut the length of the patterned ribbon to where I wanted it to be, and then I measured the plain ribbon and I just cut it the exact same size. So I'm doing the same fold over bow, and this way I wanted to show you guys what it looks like when you use 2 ribbons. So I did the same thing, crisscrossed it, and then I'm doing the accordion, and I'm going to take my twine and I'm going to wrap it here in the middle. I do wrap it 3 or 4 times, and I make sure that it's really secure before I ever take my hand off of there. That way the bow doesn't just totally fall apart and have to start over. And once I get that, I'm going to cinch it for the first time super tight. And then I go ahead and tie the knot part, and then I cinch that part super tight. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut off any excess twine that I have there on the bow. Like I said, this bow is like one of my very favorites. It's super easy to make, and there's a lot of things that you could do with it. So like I said, I added 2 ribbons here. If you wanted to add 3 or 4 ribbons, this bow would still be able to do what you needed it to do. You could make them smaller, larger loops. It's totally up to you, and then you could fluff them out. So all I'm doing is kind of fluffing out the bow part. I try it a couple different ways. I pull it out like towards the top with the plain ribbon. I don't really like that, so I end up pulling it down towards the bottom before I put it on the wreath. But I just fluff a little bit, and that's the one thing about ribbon. You just have to keep fluffing until you like the way that it looks. I go ahead and dovetail the ends because that is one simple thing that you can do to make your projects look more high-end or more of a boutique finish. So if you're selling them, or even if you're just giving them away, that gives you kind of the wow factor when you give it to somebody. So I decided that I wanted to have something in the middle of this one, so I'm just using a scrap piece of ribbon, and this just came off of the dovetailing area. It was a tiny bit too short, so I had to really pull it, but that's okay because the tighter the middle of a bow is, the more of the bow shape you get. So I'm just using hot glue here. I'm going to attach it there. Then I decide the placement of this bow should be in the middle, and then this project is complete.
Do it all with you by my side. If you're in, meet me here tonight. Be brave and come along. I'll be alright. Promise we don't need no brake lights. We can travel the world, so just say yes.
Using the same wreath form here, and I got these wood pieces at Hobby Lobby in the Christmas section last year on clearance, but I did see them again this year if you're wanting to recreate this. So they're just the birch wood, and I just cut them apart. They come in like a long strip, and all I'm doing is hot gluing them onto the wreath form. I go around with one layer, and then I go back over them with another layer just to kind of cover up one of the area that had a space. That's all. Then I'm going to just make that same bow, and I'm going to glue it here, and then I take one of my solo wood flowers and glue that to the middle, and then this project is complete.
Whatever comes next. This or that. Getting drunk on whiskey on a Tuesday night. Drinking where I'm by an open fire. Make love or fight. This or that.
We're going to start with one of these evergreen wreath forms, and we're going to take some Waverly White chalk paint, and we're going to go over all of the branches of this wreath with the paint. This is so we can get a fake snow effect on our wreath. This wreath form came from Hobby Lobby several years ago, and I picked up probably 10 of them when they were 90% off, and they've been sitting in my shed, and I finally decided to do something with them. Once I have the wreath all fluffed out, I just go back through again with some more Waverly White chalk paint, and I'm just kind of to get into the middle parts where it's still super green, because I want the white look, the snow look, to go throughout the whole wreath. So we're ready to add our deco mesh, and I got this at Hobby Lobby last Christmas. It was on clearance for 70% off, And I'm just going to go ahead and put a pipe cleaner at the end of it gathered together, and then I'm going to secure that into the wreath, and then I'm just going to bubble it around the wreath periodically and tie it in there with a pipe cleaner.
It was the night before Christmas.
I'm so excited to start doing Christmas DIYs. Let me know in the comments below what kind of DIYs are you interested in seeing for Christmas this year.
When the bell on the door jingled once more, and then time almost came to a stop. But somehow I knew, and maybe so did you, that everything would change from now on. Yes, from this Christmas on, this Christmas on, from this Christmas on, it's gonna be you and me decorating the tree from this Christmas on. We forgot what you came for, and in the coffee shop just next door, we talked for hours on end, and somehow we knew that we'd found something true, and that everything would change from now on. Yes, from this Christmas on, this Christmas on, from this Christmas on, it's gonna be you and me decorating the tree from this Christmas on. From this Christmas on.
So now that I'm done with the deco mesh, I'm going to add some lights, and I just went ahead and put the battery packs on the back of the wreath, and I secured them also with some pipe cleaners. That way, in case I want to take them off or I need to put different lights on, I can. And then I'm just going to string the lights through the deco mesh, so I'm just going in and out through the mesh, and it takes about 2 strands of lights. I got these lights at the Dollar Tree, and so they're not super long strands, but they work for this wreath. So it took me about 2, and I string those all through, and we are ready to do a bow. So I'm using my Easy Bow Maker today, and what you do is you're going to put your ribbon into there's two dowels there, and you're going to put it in between. I forgot to put the pipe cleaner in here, but you want to put the pipe cleaner in first. I end up having to go back and put it in after I've done all the ribbon. But you put your pipe cleaner in, and then you're going to put your ribbon in, and I usually leave a desired amount for the tail there. And then the bow maker has a ruler on it, so you're just going to go to the desired inch of bow that you're wanting. I'm making a 6-inch bow here, and then you're just going to go back and forth. I decided to go ahead and do about 3 loops on each side for each type of ribbon that I'm doing. So all the ribbon I'm using today was left over from last year's Christmas. I picked up all of this ribbon for this bow at the Dollar General. I think that they have some really great ribbon over there, and it's a little bit more than the Dollar Tree, but really not that much more. And they have bigger spools and a lot of different patterns, and so I really like getting my ribbon for Christmas over at Dollar General. So I want to thank everyone for watching today. Don't forget to go check out the playlist so you can see everyone's fun, festive lights DIYs in today's useful DIY challenge. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet and you're liking today's video and this kind of content, I would love it if you hit that subscribe button and join my community. So once we get the ribbon off the bow maker, we're just going to secure that pipe cleaner, and then we're going to fluff out the bow. No matter how you're making your bow today, fluffing is the most important part of the bow. You just have to twist and fluff until your eye tells you that you like what it looks like, and that's the most important part. So now that we have it all fluffed up, we are going to add it to the wreath, and I just went ahead and added it to the top with the pipe cleaner. And then I'm going to go ahead and keep fluffing, and then I'm going to dovetail the ends of the ribbon. I always tend to leave the ends to be a little bit longer, that way I can play around with them once I get it on the wreath. If you cut it too short before you put it on the wreath, then you might not like what it ends up looking like. So I always err on the side of caution with a little bit longer ribbon, that way I can always take more off than I can put back on. So as you can see, I have a little bit of a helper over to the side. He just loved this wreath and wanted to get inside of it, and several times he was crawling in my ribbon and my deco mesh. It was craziness, but anyway, he was my helper for tonight. So once I get it on there, I'm still fluffing. Fluffing takes a long time. So if you're someone who's new to bow making, or you shy away from bow making because you just think it just never can get it to look right, it really just is something that takes practice, and you just have to keep playing with it and playing with it and playing with it until you get to that desired look that you like.
Christmas, oh, we'll have
So once we have the ribbon all set in place, we are ready to add the final touches to this wreath. And I wanted to keep it pretty simple with just reds, blacks, and greens in here. So I'm just adding berries that I picked up at the Dollar Tree. And then I have a couple that have some pine cones in it. I cut the pine cones apart and I just attached the pine cones into the wreath. And I also picked those up at the Dollar Tree.
I worry about the weather, waiting for snow, and each day I feel better, and my hope begins to grow.
So here's the final look of our project, and I wasn't really sure about the mesh when I first picked it up, but now that I see it, I am really loving it and crushing on it, and I need to make some more projects with it. So I'm super excited to start using it some more in some other things. If you liked today's video, go ahead and hit that like button, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss any of the videos that I upload.
Me and you and everyone, we would run.
And we're going to take a wreath form from the Dollar Tree and then several pine cones and obviously the Rust-Oleum chalk paint. So I'm using those flatter pine cones that you can pick up. You could also use the bigger pine cones and glue them just a different way around the wreath. I'm just going to go in a circular motion here, and I'm just going to glue them end to end all around the wreath form, and I'm going to do that on each side. Project is kind of messy, so make sure if you're doing this at home that you have some paper down or something so it's easy cleanup. So I have 4 rings of pine cones here. I have one on the inside, one on the outside, one on the middle, and then I glued pine cones on top of that inside ring, and so now I'm just going to go around and glue pine cones on the outside ring to give it a fuller look. We're ready for a bow, and I was looking for more of a simple bow today because I didn't want to take away from the beauty of the pine cones, and so I kind of just reconstruct this bow from pieces of Dollar Tree burlap ribbon and then that same red and white striped ribbon that I picked up at Dollar General. And so I'm just going to glue the bow part onto the parts that hang down from the bow, and then I took the red and white striped ribbon and I wrapped it around the burlap ribbon bow part and glued it down to kind of go like to give it a stripe in the middle. And then I'm just going to take a smaller piece of that striped ribbon and go around the middle of the bow and then glue another one of those pearls into the middle of the bow. I kind of play around with the bow and decide that I want to put it at the bottom. I just think it just looks so much prettier there, and then you get the full effect of the beauty of the pine cones. Here's the final look of our wreath, and I think it turned out absolutely beautiful, and I just love the natural look of the pine cones and the white with them, and it just gives it a very snowy, beautiful look. Thanks for joining. So for this project, we're going to be creating a vintage evergreen wreath, and so I'm just using an evergreen wreath form that I had picked up at Hobby Lobby on a severe clearance. They still do sell them there right now as well, and I'm just using Rust-Oleum with primer, spray paint, and white. Then these are the ornaments that we DIY'd earlier on in the video with the wire brush, and definitely these give all the vintage feels in this wreath with the spray paint. So of all the ornaments that I DIY'd today, these were definitely my favorite and came out, I feel like, the most vintage. However, they are actual glass, which kind of limits where and how you hang them, just because you don't want them to fall off the wreath and break, or you don't want the wreath to fall, or whatever you're creating with them to fall and break as well, which is kind of why I don't use a whole lot of glass ornaments. But these were too cute not to pass up and not actually make something with. So I'm just going to go around the wreath and kind of strategically place them. I have grouping of red, green, and silver, and then I have just silver by themselves. And so I'm just going to go ahead and place that all around the wreath. So once I get those bulbs all placed in the wreath form, I'm going to go ahead and take this bow, which came from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to secure it into the middle of the top. I thought this bow did really give me some vintage vibes. I liked the green and red, and since my bulbs were green and red, I thought that it went really well. So I had picked up these tiny vintage ornaments at a discount store we have in our town. There were three different ones. There was a nutcracker guy, a snowman, and a Santa, and so I just placed them in groupings around inside the wreath. And then here's the final look of the project. I definitely get all the vintage feels from this wreath. You guys let me know down below if you think this technique was worth it or not. So this last project is made basically with ornaments that I picked up at the Dollar Tree and Walmart. So there's not a lot of the homemade vintage ornaments in this project. Only a few of the very tiny pink ones are left to go in here. So I took this tinsel garland that I got at Walmart, and I took a pool noodle and I just wrapped the pool noodle around and used some duct tape from the Dollar Tree. And now I'm just going to wrap this tinsel garland around the whole pool noodle. So tinsel was very popular back in the 60s, and so it definitely gives a vintage feel whenever you can use tinsel. So this tinsel garland, it took me a little over 2 garlands, so I had to buy 3 garlands to make this. However, I think when I was wrapping the first garland, I could have overlapped it a little without realizing it, and so I think you could get away with 2 tinsel garlands, but just in case, buy 3. And then I'm just varying the ornaments that I picked up. So the majority of these are from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just grouping them: a white one, a pink one, a beige one, and I just sort of go in a pattern that's pleasing to my eye. So if you're not into the pinks and beiges, you know, you can definitely recreate this in any like color scheme that you want. They have so many tinsel garlands over at Walmart, and they're super pretty, and it gives you all the vintage feels without even having to do any extra work for it. So after I get them grouped into groups of 3, then I go back with some bigger bulbs, and I'm going to go on the outside of the wreath with just one bulb. So I'm kind of filling in the spaces between the groups of 3, and I'm going to do that on the entire outside of this wreath. So like I said, the majority of these ornaments were store-bought in. That is one kind of tip and trick about vintage decor, is if you're using tinsel, you can lay your ornaments inside of the wreath, kind of like we're doing here for this project, and you take up a lot less space and you still get a wonderfully vintage vibe from it. So when I think about vintage ornaments, I tend to think more on the sides of pinks and teals. You can see in the project that we did previous to this one, you can do red and green, but a lot of vintage decor around Christmas is pink and teal. So that was kind of the inspiration I had going with this wreath. So again, I'm just like strategically placing these in between the groups of 3, and I did hot glue all of the ornaments into this wreath. Because it was a pool noodle, I just put a heavy amount of hot glue on the end here, and then I kind of stabbed it into my pool noodle, and so it had a pretty good hold. You can see one of them sort of fell off here on the right hand side, but that was the only mishap I had in this whole wreath. So then I'm going to do the exact same process on the inside rim of this wreath that I just did on the outer rim. And so I'm just going in between the groupings of 3, and I'm interchanging the different colors of bulbs that I have. So most of the ones that I bought at the Dollar Tree, I think the only bulbs on this wreath that came from Walmart are the little tiny pink ones that we DIY'd for our vintage ornaments. Otherwise, all the other ornaments on this wreath came from the Dollar Tree. So I just randomly go around, and if you can see over here on the right, I put all of my ornaments in a bowl mixed together so that all I had to do was kind of grab a color that I wanted. That made it really easy to assemble this wreath. So if you're doing any kind of big projects like that, you kind of want to have all your supplies laid out for you before you start. So now I'm going back in with the very smallest ornaments that we have. Some of these are the ones that we DIY'd, and some of them are just gold bulbs that I picked up at the Dollar Tree. And these end up being the filler for the rest of my wreath. So to complete this wreath, I do take some of that shabby chic ribbon from the Dollar Tree, and I loop it through the top of the wreath, tie just a little knot at the top for my hanger, and then here is the final look of this wreath. I cannot tell you how much I love the look of this, and honestly, we didn't DIY hardly maybe 5 ornaments in this whole wreath. So again, the title of my video, was it worth it? I guess it kind of just depends on the style of the wreath that you're going for. I felt like it wasn't worth it in the end because this wreath ends up being my totally favorite project of the day. So for this project, we're going to use a wicker wreath form. I got this at a garage sale. You can pick up these wreath forms at the Dollar Tree as well. I'm just using some ribbon I had in my stash, but I'm pretty sure this came from Hobby Lobby. As I'm wrapping it around the wreath form, I want to make sure that it's super tight. And then every third wrap around, I just put a little bit of hot glue on the wicker part, and then I just keep wrapping. And I'm going to do that for this entire wreath. I believe it takes about 1 spool of ribbon to cover this whole wreath. It might be a little bit less. Like I said, this was in my stash, but I did pick this up in the Christmas section at Hobby Lobby. So we're ready to work on the cookie cutters, and I'm using this paper pack that I picked up at Hobby Lobby in the Christmas section. Pretty sure I got it last year, but I think that I have seen it there again this year. And then I'm using these cookie cutters that I picked up at an antique shop in my local area. These cookie cutters are almost all vintage cookie cutters except for maybe 3. I was looking for Christmas cookie cutters, but I did pick up all the ones that I could find that were this vintage design. So all I'm going to do is trace around my cookie cutter. I did pick out a different piece of paper from the paper pack for each one of my cookie cutters. So I'm going to continue this process with all of the rest of the ornaments that are vintage, and I'm just using a different piece of paper for each one of the ornaments. So now that I have them all cut out, I'm ready to assemble them. These are really awesome because you're just going to press the paper into the cookie cutter. What I did was, after I had it cut out, I pressed it in first, then I took some hot glue and went in the inside of the cookie cutter and then pressed my paper back in, just so that my paper already kind of was flattened out to go into the design. So if you have a super hot glue gun like I do, make sure you're wearing some kind of finger protectors or something, just to make sure when you press down the paper, this is super thin, and these are metal, so the underneath part of your cookie cutter is going to be pretty hot. So after I have that done, then I'm going to do that same process for all of these vintage ornaments. I'm not going to make you watch me do that, but just know that I'm using that same process to do all of these ones. So I do have three cookie cutters that are not necessarily vintage, so if you can't find the ones with the backing, you could still make the same project using just Christmas cookie cutters, and I wanted to show you the process. So this one was a little bit more tricky. This particular cookie cutter with the rubber part on the back of it actually worked better than the other two, but you're just going to trace around just like we did the other cookie cutter, but this time I'm using some cardstock and I'm going to cut around to make it just slightly bigger than the cookie cutter so that I can glue the cookie cutter onto the cardstock. That gives me the back that this cookie cutter is missing, and then I can take my paper and either push it down into the cookie cutter. I did try to do that, but it didn't quite work as good as it did with the vintage ones. Or you could take just a regular glue stick, glue the patterned paper cut out onto the cardstock paper, and then glue the cookie cutter on top of that. I did do that towards the end, and that did seem to work a little bit better. But it's basically the same process. You're going to give it back to your cookie cutter, and then you're going to glue in your patterned paper. Now we're ready to assemble the wreath, and these vintage cookie cutters are a little bit tricky. They have like a section in the back that sticks up that you could hold on to if you were going to cut out actual cookies, and so it was a little tricky to glue that onto wicker, but you just kind of have to keep holding it in place and stabilizing it while the hot glue dries. So I did lay out the cookie cutters prior to gluing them onto the wreath, just so I had an idea of how I wanted them to be laid out. I was slightly disappointed because I felt like I didn't have quite enough cookie cutters. I had 11 cookie cutters in total, and it wasn't quite enough to like overlap them. Once I had them all over, I think I only had 2 that were able to overlap on it. So if you're going to recreate this and you get your wicker wreath form from the Dollar Tree, I think that you'll probably be fine with 11 cookie cutters, because this wicker wreath was slightly bigger than the ones that you can pick up there. If you're going to have a bigger wicker wreath, then I suggest maybe about 15 cookie cutters, because that way you'll have some that you can lay on top of each other. So all I'm going to do here is just complete gluing on the cookie cutters onto the wreath form, and then we're ready to kind of add the bow and a few embellishments. So the inspiration piece for this project had the cookie cutters just glued to each other in the form of a circle. I didn't feel that that would be very sturdy, so that's why I chose to glue them to a wreath form, but that's also an option. You could just glue the cookie cutters together in a circle and make the wreath that way. So now I'm ready for my bow at the top, and I just wanted a simple bow, so I just folded this over about 3 times. You'll see I made kind of a boo-boo here. I have like a section of the bow that's just sort of sticking out, and I guess I wasn't paying attention when I folded over the ribbon, so I just glue that down with some hot glue, and you'll never know once we make the wreath. Or once we add the bow to the wreath. So I'm just going to fluff it out, and then I go ahead and make some tails for this. I glue this bow on to the tails, and then I'm going to glue it onto the middle of the wreath. So to give this middle part a little bit more dimension, I'm just going to take some twine, wrap it around a few times. I think it ends up being maybe about 15 times that I go around this, but I give it a good hefty dose of twine here in the middle to give it just more character, I guess. But then I'm going to go ahead, glue it to the tails, and then I dovetail the ends of my tails and glue it to the wreath. I did go ahead and dovetail the ends of that ribbon, and I did shorten it up a little bit just so you could see all the cookie cutters. So you could totally stop right here, and the wreath is super cute as it is. I just felt like there was some pieces that were pretty bare on my wreath, so I decided to take this buffalo check ribbon. I just made little basic shoelace bows with it and dovetailed the ends, and then I'm gluing those into some of the bare spots on the wreath, and I do about 5 of these ribbons all around, and I like to have odd numbers because I think that it draws your eye more, but it's totally up to you if you even wanted to do this step or how many bows you wanted to put on there. So after I get these bows glued on, then this project is complete.
Hold up, I am on my way. I'm in motion. Let's go to the ocean. Yeah, let's go outside. We can hang out on the beach without freezing. Yeah, isn't that amazing? In Christmas times, we'll be chilling and having a good time. Doesn't matter if the snow is falling or the wind blows and the rain is pouring. It will always be Christmas in my heart. But this
So for today's project, we're going to start with one of these artificial evergreen wreaths, and I took it outside and I'm going to spray it with just some white spray paint. I don't fluff it out, nothing special, I just spray it so it looks like it has a little bit of snow on it. Next, I'm taking these plastic candy canes that I got at Hobby Lobby, and they are 40% off, and you get like 48 of them, so you get quite a bit in the box. So if you want to make more of these or you do different things with them, I have another video coming out this week that has another project with these. But we're using ribbon here, and we're just going to wrap it all around the candy cane. In my next video, I use fabric, and I liked using the fabric a lot better than the ribbon, but this ribbon wasn't all that forgiving either. It's one of those burlap ribbons from the Dollar Tree, and it's kind of the thinner, non-wired ribbon. So we're just going to wrap it around the candy cane all the way to the top. This piece ends up being slightly shorter than the candy cane, so I just take another little tiny piece and continue wrapping. It's super forgiving, so if you don't cut the right amount or you wrap it kind of funny, it's okay because we're going for a country look, and so you kind of want it to be the ragged, kind of old-fashioned, vintagey looking material. So once I have the candy canes all wrapped with the ribbon, and this was I believe one spool of ribbon that I used to do all 10 candy canes. Then I'm going to put them back to back, and I'm just using some twine from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to wrap it around several times to connect them together. Once I have them totally wrapped all together, then I go ahead and cut off the twine, and then I'm going to hot glue the twine to the back of these candy canes. So this is super easy. I'm just wanting them to stay in place for when I attach them to my wreath. So after I put the twine on here, I did put a pipe cleaner, but I had cut my pipe cleaners in half and they ended up being too short. So if you want to apply these to the wreath without gluing them on or gluing them onto anything else, definitely use a full pipe cleaner, and you're just going to wrap it around here after the twine, and then you can attach the ribbon after that. But anyway, I just go ahead and do all the bunches, and now I'm ready to make some little bows. So these are just, the messy bows, just a smaller version, and I'm taking some red burlap ribbon, some gold ribbon, and some kind of country polka dotted ribbon that's red and brown. These were all ribbons I had in my stash, and I'd be willing to bet they all came from either the Dollar Tree or Dollar General, because that seems to be where I buy my Christmas ribbon. So once I have those tied together in the middle, I'm just going to go ahead and attach it here to the candy canes, and you can see my pipe cleaner there. Like I said, cutting it in half was too short, so if you want to attach it with that, then go ahead and use a full pipe cleaner. So now I'm taking some burlap that I had in my stash, and I'm going to cut 3 pieces of burlap. So I'm going with a tan color, then I'm going with the dark brown color, and then a red. I'm going to treat this kind of like the messy bow, so I'm going to crisscross it, and then I'm going to put one down the middle, kind of like I'm making a star shape, I guess. And then I'm going to tie it off in the middle. So just a note to self, I felt like I should have measured my burlap a little bit better. These were kind of large pieces. But I mean, I love the final look of it all, and I'm really happy with it. So it's kind of up to you, and if you want to make these a little bit smaller. But here's the crisscross pattern, and then one in the middle, and then I'm going to tie it together like I would a bow. And then I'm just using a pipe cleaner here, and I'm going to tie it off in the middle because I'm going to tie these pieces into my wreath with the pipe cleaner. So I pull really tightly here, just like I would some deco mesh, and then I secure it. So this piece right here was a project that I already created in another video. So if you want to see how I made this middle section of our wreath, I will put that up here in the cards. I'll also put it in the description box, and you can check that video out. So I'm going to attach the sign to the middle, and I went ahead and used hot glue, my pipe cleaners, and then I finished it off in the back there with some tape and ribbon just to secure it. So once I get it onto the wreath form, I'm ready to attach the rest of the parts. So I'm adding the burlap pieces first, and I like to go in odd numbers. So I'm going to just go around the wreath. I believe I used 5 of these, and then when I go ahead and get all of the pieces of burlap attached there, then I'm going to go back with the candy canes that we already put together, and those are going to go into the middle of the burlap pieces. So I had 2 candy canes left over that did not have a burlap piece to go to, and so I went ahead and attached those just right into the wreath. I realized after I was done though that I wanted a burlap piece to go up at the top of the reindeer's head, and so I was short one. So if you go ahead and put the burlap above the reindeer's head, or whatever piece you're using in the middle here, you're gonna want to have maybe one more extra candy cane grouping. So I just hot glued these into the middle of the burlap just because my pipe cleaners weren't long enough to go around there, but you could secure them with a pipe cleaner as well into the wreath form, and that would work just as good. So this was just a super simple wreath to do today, and it turned out so cute. I love farmhouse, I love country, rustic country, and that is the theme I'm going for this year for my Christmas decor. So I'm super excited. Once I get those all onto the wreath, I'm going to take some raffia, and you can see me, I'm just kind of poking it in around the burlap pieces. I do go back and attach it with hot glue once I'm pretty happy with where I've made the placement of it. I like this because it definitely gives it the country feel, and you get just kind of more of a, I guess, down on the farm country kind of look with the raffia. But I just go around all the pieces of the burlap and I stick it in there, and I don't really measure out how much I'm putting in there. This was just the rest of a bag that was already open, and I spread it out amongst the entire wreath. And once I get all those pieces in there, then this wreath is going to be complete.
Hold up, I am on my way, I'm in motion. Let's go to the ocean. Yeah, let's go outside. We can hang out on the beach without freezing. Yeah, isn't that
For this project, we're going to be making a snowman wreath, and to make this wreath, I picked up one of the tinsel snowmen that they have at the Dollar Tree. These are plastic wreath forms, and they have these notches that go around the outside of the plastic part. The tinsel is wrapped around each one of the notches, and so it's super easy to unravel this. We're just going to take all the tinsel off all 3 pieces of the snowman, and we'll be left with a plastic wreath form. So I'm using this silver deco mesh that I got at the Dollar Tree. I wanted this to be a full Dollar Tree project, so I did not go out and buy any deco mesh. This was in my stash, but they do put out the silver ones at Christmas time. If you wanted to use black, you could definitely use black for the hat as well. So I'm using my cutting mat, and I'm measuring this deco mesh to be about 6 inches long. I'm going to cut this full roll of deco mesh, and then I'm going to cut another 7 white deco mesh rolls the same exact way. So once I get all my deco mesh cut, I'm going to be rolling them like a burrito style, and I take 3 of the pieces and I roll them, and then I make them into a bundle. I'm going to use a pipe cleaner to attach them together. Now, when I use a metal wreath form, it really doesn't matter what color of pipe cleaner I use because you can't see it once you get all the deco mesh in there. I did feel like this one you could see a few pieces of my pipe cleaner, so definitely pick up a package of the white pipe cleaners to do the white part and a package of silver pipe cleaners to do the hat if you're doing it silver, or black if you're doing it black. But we're just going to be wrapping these bundles around the outside of this plastic frame. So there is a circular piece that goes on the inside, and then like a scalloped looking piece that goes on the outside. I wrapped it around one on one side and one on the other, and then I just secured it into the back. I am going to wrap the deco mesh bundles all around the outside. So this bottom circle took about 2 rolls of the deco mesh, and then it takes a little bit less as you go up the snowman's body. Altogether, I used 7 rolls of the deco mesh. I had a few pieces left over that I went ahead and went back into the middle of some of them and added them there. So if you want more in the middle of these wreath forms, then you would need to use 8 packages. Once I get it on there, I fluff it out, and then I just go ahead and do that same method for all 3 of the circles. So once I get all the white pieces on, I'm ready to do the hat, and I'm just basically doing the same thing. There is a little bit less of the plastic wreath form up there, so I just go down in a straight line for the hat against the white part, and I'm just wrapping it around there, and then I go around the entire outside to make the hat. So for his scarf, I'm just using some ribbon I had in my stash. I am pretty sure this came from the Dollar Tree. If it didn't come from the Dollar Tree, it came from Dollar General. So I just tie it around like a scarf, and then I make a bow just by folding it over and cinching it together. And I tie that off with a pipe cleaner, and then I'm attaching that pipe cleaner into the plastic wreath form. So I did use a full-sized pipe cleaner for this part, just because I wasn't sure how much of the deco mesh I would need to go through, but I go ahead and I secure that into the scarf to make it look like it is part of the scarf, and then I'm going to tie that in the back. And then I'm going to take some more of these giant bells that I had, and I glue one to the middle of the ribbon, and then I fluff it out. I do go ahead and dovetail the ends as well. And then I'm going to add 3 more of the giant bells to the body to look like the buttons. You could add a face here if you wanted to. I chose not to. I liked the look of it just the way it was, but a face would also be just as adorable. And then here is a look at the final project.
Good time. Doesn't matter if the snow is falling or the wind blows and the rain is pouring. It will always be Christmas in my heart. But this year I wanna hang out with my friends and family, making angels in the sand. You ready? Doesn't matter.
So I'm going to start off by cutting my deco mesh, and I do end up using about 7 rolls of deco mesh for this wreath. I'm cutting each piece at 6 inches, and I use 4 white rolls and 3 red rolls that came from the Dollar Tree. Once I have all the pieces cut, I'm going to roll them into bundles, and then I'm going to secure the bundles together with a pipe cleaner. So I use 3 separate bundles, and then I use a half of a pipe cleaner. So if you have hand problems or it's just easier for you to use a full pipe cleaner, you can definitely do that and then trim them off when you are totally finished with the wreath in the back. So how I secure mine is I take the pipe cleaner, I wrap it around, and then I pull the deco mesh really tightly against the pipe cleaner, and then I twist. This gives it a super firm hold with the pipe cleaner, and I'm able to kind of bend it to how I want it to look. So I'm going to be attaching this first roll of deco mesh to the top of my hat wreath, and this wreath form did come from the Dollar Tree. So I'm just wrapping my deco mesh around the outside of the wire wreath form, and I just go all the way around the triangle shape. Once I get my deco mesh on, then I'm going to take some ribbon, and I'm going to be wrapping my ribbon around the center of the witch hat. So I'm using some wired burlap ribbon. I believe this came from Dollar General. And I'm going to just glue periodically as I go around the wreath. Now, I had some struggles here with my ribbon, and I don't 100% love how this middle piece turned out. I think that if I were to recreate this again, I would wrap it and then go back up the wreath. So I tried to just go down with my ribbon, and there is some gaps when I get kind of down to the bottom, and I have to use some hot glue to fill those in. So just kind of a thought, if you're going to make this, I would go down at my angle and then come back up at the other angle. So once I get this whole part covered, and I'm going down all the way to just barely the top of the brim, and I'm going to be using some more bundles of deco mesh. So this time I'm going to intertwine them here. So I'm going to have 2 rolls of red and 1 roll of white, and then I'm going to have 2 rolls of white and 1 roll of red. And this is where I use the rest of my deco mesh. So it is about 3 packages of white deco mesh and 2 packages of red deco mesh. So I'm going to go ahead and roll all of my bundles together. I always roll all the bundles ahead of time before I attach them to the wreath. I find that it just goes quicker. I have seen where people store their bundles together in like baskets and things like that. I just have them separated on a table, but it definitely, however you can get it to be, more organized, is going to be that much faster for you. So I am attaching these bundles, and I go back and forth, 2 red and 1 white bundle, and then another 2 white and 1 red bundle. And I am going to go down along that wire piece along the ribbon, and then I'm going to go all the way around the wire frame, so all the way down on the bottom as well. It is pretty full once you get across that top piece. If you don't want to do the bottom, as long as you fluff out your deco mesh good enough, it should cover the wire form. I thought that it looked better going around the whole outside edge. So now I'm ready to make a bow to go on my wreath, and I'm measuring my ribbon out at 6 inches, and then my other ribbon was measured out at 10 inches, and I'm just folding it over on top of each other to have 4 loops on both sides. Then I'm going to take my ribbon, fold it in half, and then I'm going to take a pair of scissors, and I'm going to very thinly cut a little strip there. So I had a lot of ribbon right here, and I only wanted a really small cut. So it did take me a little bit to get through the ribbon, but like I said, just a very small cut here. And then you're going to take a pipe cleaner, and you're going to wrap that pipe cleaner around the middle so that the ribbon has something to hold on to. If you didn't have a pipe cleaner or didn't want to use a pipe cleaner here, you could definitely use wire, floral wire, another like twine would work here good, just something to tie it in the middle with and give it something to like really hold on to when you fluff out your bow. So now I'm just going to open up my bow and fluff it, and this is the part that is probably the most time consuming. Once I get all the pieces fluffed out on the ends, I do go ahead and dovetail those so that it gives it a more high-end look. And then I'm going to use that same pipe cleaner that I used in the middle to tie it off, and I'm just going to use that to tie it into my wreath. So I decided to go ahead and tie the bow into the corner on the right hand side. I did play around with this a little bit. I tried it out at the top, and then I tried it out at the bottom, and I just thought that it looked better on the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead, like I said, and attach that there at the very bottom. And then I decide to go ahead and glue a giant jingle bell from the Dollar Tree into the middle of my bow and to the top of my wreath, just so I have a more Santa look. And then once I have that all in there and glued on, then here is the final look of this project.
Let's go outside, the snow is falling down and every child is having so much fun. The snowman is twice the size as me, with a smile as quirky as mine. We're holding hands to keep each other warm while we stand.
So today we're going to be making a winter wreath, and all the supplies for today's wreath came from the Dollar Tree. We're going to start out with this foam wreath form. I've been having a hard time saying that. And we're just going to take the yarn and we're going to wrap it around very tightly around the form. And I'm placing hot glue every once in a while, all in the same place that I'm going to have on the back of the wreath. That way the glue is going to show through, because this thread is, or this yarn is really thin, and so I want the glue to be showing towards the back, not to the front of our project. Here you can see I have it tightly wound and just a little bit on the wreath, and I'm going to continue to follow this step around the entire wreath form, just putting glue, I'm going to show you here in a second, onto the wreath form and then pulling it really tightly next to the next thread, and I'm just going to continue to do that through the entire wreath. So I just want to show you here how tightly wound I have it, and I have it really close together, and I'm just going to go ahead and do that through the whole wreath form. I have the whole foam piece covered with my yarn, and you can see on the back where I put the glue, so it's all roughly in the same place there. I'm going to set that aside and take the rest of the yarn that I had left over from wrapping it on the wreath, and I'm going to start making my pom-poms. So I'm going to put a piece on the inside of my hand, and then I'm going to wrap it. I chose to wrap it about 50 times around my hand, and then I'm going to slide it off my hand here in a second. Once I slide it off of my hand, I want to keep it scrunched together in kind of a ball form. And then I'm going to take an extra piece of string that I cut off of the yarn spool, and I'm going to tie that around the middle of the little bundle of yarn. This was my first time making pom-poms, and the first couple I was like really nervous about getting it like on there right, but when you're tying the string around the group of yarn, you want to make sure it's really tight, because we're going to start cutting here in a second, and I had a couple that weren't super tight, and a couple of my yarn strings ended up falling off of it. So you want to make sure that that knot that you tie in the middle there is super tight. So once you have the knot, you're going to cut around both sides of where you tied. So there should be like a little space for your scissors to fit through. You're just going to put them through there and cut, and then you're going to do the same thing on the other side. Once you have it all kind of cut up and it's getting the resemblance of a shape of a pom-pom, then we're going to give it a little bit of a haircut. So what I did was I just sort of grabbed it in my hand and kind of pushed forward like you can see me doing, and then I just trim it off. That way they are uniform size, and then I do it on the other side, and then as I kind of keep making these pom-poms, I do it about 4 times, like so, on the ends and then in the middle, and it gives you a really nice good sized pom-pom. So I end up making about 8 of this brown color, and then I also have some cream colored yarn, and I go ahead and make 8 of the cream colored yarn pom-poms as well. As you see me gluing them onto the wreath here in a few minutes, I am short 1 pom-pom, so I end up getting 1 more skein of yarn and making 1 extra cream colored pom-pom. So altogether there are 8 brown pom-poms and 9 cream colored pom-poms. Both of these yarns came from the Dollar Tree. This brown yarn was a lot thinner than the cream colored yarn for some reason, so the cream colored pom-poms end up being super fluffy, where these are kind of not quite so fluffy. So all I'm going to do once I have the pom-poms done is I kind of spread it out on the back and I apply some hot glue, and I'm just going to glue that right down to the wreath form. So now I'm assembling all of the pom-poms I made, and I'm just going in with one brown and one cream color, and I do that all the way around the wreath. So you can see my spot for the missing pom-pom. I just go ahead and make another cream one real quick and then glue it there in the middle, and then I'm just kind of fluffing out my pom-poms. They're so soft. I really liked the cream colored yarn. It was very, very soft and puffy. So now we're ready to attach the middle of our wreath, and I just picked up these Christmas tree ornaments from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to cut off the top parts, and then we're going to glue them to the center of our wreath. So I do go ahead and glue these kind of staggered, so one is taller than the other, and then I do go ahead and glue like the corners of them together so that they're more stable in the center of the wreath. So the last step is just to take some of this twine and tie it into a shoelace bow, and I'm going to glue it to the top of the tree where the hole was for the Christmas tree hanger, and I'm just going to apply it over that so that you can't see the hole, and it adds kind of a nice touch to the tree and draws back in the brown colors from the pom-poms. So to make the hanger for the wreath, I just take a piece of the cream colored yarn, and I just turn over the wreath and I glue that yarn piece to the back, just in a little loop, so I have some way to hang it on the wall. So here's the final look of the wreath, and I really love how it turned out. I had a lot of fun making these pom-poms, and I think I would like to do some more pom-pom projects in the future. Let me know what you think about the wreath down in the comments below. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, thank you so much for being here and watching. I'm so glad that you're here. And if you are looking for more mega video inspiration, I have a video up here, as well as some other wreath DIYs if you want to check that out. And as always, wherever you are in your journey is a perfect place to start, and I will see you in my next video.